We interrupt this program with a special bulletin.
America is now under martial law. All constitutional rights have been suspended. Stay in your homes. Do not attempt to contact loved ones, insurance agents, or attorneys. Shut up. Do not attempt to think, or depression may occur. Stay in your homes. Curfew is at 7 p.m. sharp after work. Anyone caught outside the gates of their subdivisions after curfew will be shot. Remain calm. Do not panic. Your neighborhood watch officer will be by to collect urine samples in the morning. Anyone interfering with the collection of urine samples will be shot. Houses will be inspected for trace elements at noon. Anyone failing to display the mandatory embossed black velvet Mexican-style painting of King George Bush II on their living room wall will be shot. To further protect private property against terrorist attacks, cameras and surveillance equipment will be placed on all lampposts and streetlights. Anyone failing to attend morning school prayer and prescribed worship services on Sunday will be promptly arrested and dispatched to a re-education resort. Stay in your homes. Remain calm. The number one enemy of progress is questions. National security is more important than individual rights. Under the provisions of the War on Drugs, Zero Tolerance, and the Child Protection and Obscenity Enforcement Act, all property and life savings of suspected drug users and suspected pornographers will be seized and sold prior to trial. Anyone opposing this policy will be presumed to be under the influence of drugs and shipped immediately to boot camp to serve a sentence of hard labor beneath an inflatable statue of Nancy Reagan being humped by John Ashcroft. Sports broadcasts will proceed as scheduled. No more than 2 people may gather anywhere without permission. Green Bay Packers jackets will be confiscated and its owners burned at the stake. Use only the drugs prescribed by your coach, your boss, or your supervisor. Shut up. Be happy. Obey all orders without question. Shut up. The comfort you've demanded is now mandatory. At last, everything is done for you. Thanks a lot for coming down. If there's a way to get a little bit of house lights on the audience so I can see more than the front row, that would be cool. Also wondering, since I sound a little odd compared to sound check, if I should move this little mic anywhere. Is this any better? It is. The Cubs shirt doesn't know. Testing, testing, testing. What's that like? Is that any better? You like that one better? Clear down there? Okay, right between my titties now. How's that? Is that better or is that not better? Like that better? Okay. Time to Take it all off, somebody says. Want to see my Depends? Autographed in brown? You can wear it on New Year's, too. Anyway, for those of you out of Depends by now, those of you school age and beyond, it is time for a quiz. What do George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, should we turn the volume down and get rid of some of the ring? What do you think? Am I too loud or am I okay? Good. Testing, okay. What do George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, John Ashcroft, Jeb Bush, Joseph Lieberman, Ari Fleischer, Karl Rove, Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert, Dictator of the House Tom DeLay, Bill Clinton, Bill O'Reilly, Rush Limbaugh, George Will, Newt Gingrich, Kenneth Starr, Antonin Scalia, Wayne Lapierre, the Executive Director of the National Rifle Association, Sylvester Rambo Stallone, and Arnold Terminator Schwarzenegger all have in common. Not only are they all just chomping at the bit to send other people into a bloodbath in Iraq, not a damn one of them ever served in the military or saw combat. The only one even close is W, who at least showed up occasionally for National Guard photo ops or duty or whatever in Texas, and that's about it. That's how much they know about what war is really like. Making it all the more important that each and every one of you be at the St. Paul Cathedral steps in St. Paul Saturday, October 26th, 3:30 p.m. this Saturday. Let's meet at the Cathedral, 3:30, and march to the state capitol. This is part of a national day of protest against the war in Iraq. They're going to be doing stuff in San Francisco, big one in D.C. Join them for some solidarity and all. And just remember that this, if it seems really intimidating or alone, that people like Noam Chomsky and Tom Hayden, one of the founders of the SDS and leaders of the anti-Vietnam War movement, say the protests against this war are way further off the ground so far than they were at the same period when the Vietnam War scam was being cooked up. So be there, aloha. Well, I'll tell you, I don't like Saddam Hussein, I don't like Osama bin Laden or Islamic fundamentalists either, especially what they do to women. And I want to be safe from terrorism too. But I get equally frightened when people like Bush come right out and say stuff like, "You're with us or with the terrorists." Some choice. Now is the time, especially on those Capitol steps, to stand up and say, "Yo, we're not with Bush or the terrorists." And start asking in louder and louder fashion, is what we're doing over there really the best way to solve this problem? Or will this escalating orgy of feel-good violence to soothe our inner child bring much bigger problems down the road? In 1991, Jimmy Carter publicly warned the last George Bush that his Gulf War would set back peace in Middle Eastern relations at least 20 years. Now what happens? Now what do we do? I fear a mass slaughter of innocent civilians already far greater than what went down at the World Trade Center, with the clown prince of the Texas oil barons being handed the keys to weapons of mass destruction. While Israel is being dragged down the toilet by its own Saddam Hussein, and his name is Ariel Sharon. I fear governments all over the world rounding up and attacking anyone opposing their policy for any reason on the grounds that they are aiding terrorists. like we did when we locked up thousands of labor activists and immigrants in the 1920s for the crime of opposing World War I. And no one has been more cynical about using the tragedy of September 11th and manipulating how upset we are and how fearful we are, and no one has been more disrespectful to the victims on September 11th than the Bush administration themselves. Using that tragedy as an excuse to launch a war in Iraq because they tried to kill my dad. How sad they didn't succeed. After September 11th of last year, the Bush people came right out within days and said, in order to fight terrorism, it was urgent we start drilling for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. That'll show them. Even though they admitted during the campaign in 2000 that oil was earmarked for sale to China. And Congress quickly got into the act, ordering up 100 more multi-gazillion-dollar tanker jets built by Boeing, even though the Air Force said they didn't want them and didn't need them. And Bush said terrorism is the reason he should be given fast-track authority, which the Republican puppet Congress gave him recently. Fast-track authority, as it's called, to negotiate worldwide trade and labor agreements without bothering to consult Congress very much at all. They can't even amend the treaties anymore, just in time for them to try and ram through the free trade agreement of the Americas, which is like NAFTA, if you've heard of that one, on crack, basically. As bad or worse than the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the GATT Treaty, the international one that gave us, your friends and mine, the WTO, the World Trade Organization. And what's really nasty about FTAA is it gives corporations the same standing and power as sovereign nations and democratically elected officials and laws to go file a complaint and bleed other countries for sanctions for interfering with their profits and all, through such crimes against humanity as not privatizing their water supply, failure to turn their school over to the corporation who filed the complaint. Even under NAFTA, UPS, United Parcel Service, is shaking down the government of Canada, trying to get tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in damages because they say the Canadians interfered with their profiteering by having their own postal service. And Bush wants to unleash floodgates of that all over this hemisphere. FTAA would extend down to Central America, South America, Caribbean. Only Castro's people are spared, which could be lucky for them in the long run, couldn't it? And anybody who attacks this or questions it, or questions any of the corporate agenda of what they're now calling globalization, which is basically means signing over our sovereignty and laws to corporations so they rule us directly under things like NAFTA and the GATT Treaty and FTAA, protesting any of that, and you too are causing terrorism. You too are part of that problem, or so said the Wall Street Journal. Prime Minister of Italy claimed the anti-globalization protesters in Seattle and later Geneva in Italy were responsible directly for the towers collapsing in New York. And anybody who deviates too publicly or visibly from the Bush party line is demonized as well, and pummeled and pilloried. I never thought I would ever feel sorry for Barbara Streisand in my life. But right now, she's getting her ass kicked just for saying we shouldn't go to war right now. Bill Maher, politically incorrect, a few days after the attacks on September 11th, said in a well-meaning and I think innocent comment that in a weird twist, basically something to the effect of, there was in a weird twisted way, it took a lot of nerve to fly those planes into the buildings and die, but firing missiles at other countries from 2,000 miles away is cowardly. And for that, his reward was advertisers pulling out of the show, local station affiliates canceling the show, and now, of course, Politically Incorrect is off the air completely. And Ari Fleischer, another gentleman draft dodger who weaseled out of going to Vietnam and is now Bush's press secretary, said, well, in light of Bill Maher, people have to watch what they say and watch what they do. Yeah. No, you can't have that. We're at war with terrorists. Free speech has to go, remember? You know, we're already all on file anyway, so what the fuck? Let's use the free speech while we still have it, okay? My reputation was so bad with those people, clear down to my files on me in grade school, that I got to read before I went to high school. It turned out even my first grade teacher, who I thought liked me, or I liked school still then, wrote me up as this bad seed. And then the teacher the next year reads that, then the next one reads that, and all the little school pictures all in a row, all nice and tinted black and white, so they look like mug shots and everything. Probably do that to all the kids. And where do those files go when you leave school? They have to go somewhere. So I suspect it's somewhere in the bowels of the Justice Department or something, just in case you cause problems and fail to just hide in the suburbs and play golf the rest of your life or something. Also weighing in on the anti-free speech train, Lynn Cheney, Dick Cheney's wife, who has mostly been kept under wraps, even though she's done a lot of damage herself over the years. In the Reagan-Bush regime, the first regime anyway, she was head of the National Endowment for the Humanities and cut off grants to any project in any of the universities and all that she deemed political. But anything like looking into germ bombs or something that would benefit large corporations or drug companies, that was okay. It was patriotically correct, I suppose. Anyway, now she's the head of this group called the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, who also includes your friend and mine, Senator Joseph Lieberman, Al Gore's choice for vice president. And they published a report after September 11th, claiming that the weakest link, you are the weakest link in the fight against terrorism was college professors. Listing 117 unpatriotic acts committed by instructors who they said shouldn't just be disciplined, they should be fired. For such innocent things as the University of Oregon guy, all he said was that we need to understand the reasons for the hatred in the Middle East. That's all he did. And the scary part here is the American Council of Trustees and Alumni sits on $3 billion of grant money every year that they can pull if it's too political. Other things flying under the radar screen for most people who scared the shit out of me. New York Times nonchalantly says, oh yeah, in an editorial, just one sentence, in the next 5 years we're going to double the size of the CIA. What? They've done such a wonderful, conscientious job, we need twice as much of them now? And the Bush mob has been obsessively secretive about the way they go about their business, even cutting off people's Freedom of Information Act requests, and even refusing to release papers of Ronald Reagan's administration that were supposed to become public. They're not going to let Bush's daddy's papers out either, perhaps because many people there might wind up in jail if people saw the records of what they were up to, which also may explain why they still won't release any records of the meetings Dick Cheney held behind closed doors with his so-called energy task force after the corporate manufactured energy crisis, the electricity shortage in California a year and a half ago or so. And his task force turned out to include Enron executives and Enron executives, and more Enron executives, and that was about all he talked to, apparently. And notice how spineless the Democrats have been in responding to all this. There was a little moaning about Enron at first, but who do they put in charge of the investigation but Lieberman, who's probably taken more money from horrible people and definitely more money from Enron than any other of the Democrats in the Senate, so he had to mainly concentrate on covering his own ass, true to form. I mean, they've been spineless on so many things, and this is an election year, and they don't even mention anymore that Bush stole the election. They don't even bother with that anymore. They don't even bother pointing out that since Bush got in, 2 million more people have lost their jobs, 1.3 million more Americans are living below the poverty line, 1.4 million more people have joined the 40 million who've lost their health insurance, and contrast that to every other main country in the industrialized world where the right to see a doctor when you're sick or you're hurting is guaranteed by law as a basic human right. But not here. I should also say that the only party in this country that has any chance of getting anywhere in the elections who's trying to do something about this with the health insurance, it ain't the Democrats, it's the Green Party. And even from a business point of view, since Bush got in, economic growth, overall economic growth, lowest of any president in 50 years. And the long-term, the $5.6 trillion surplus that Clinton left him is already a $400 billion deficit after 2 years, and we haven't even started paying for all our little wars yet, have we? And instead, they make war on us through Attorney General John Ashcrack and his USA Patriot Act that most of Congress didn't even bother to read, and only one senator voted against it, and it wasn't Wellstone, it was Feingold. Wisconsin, where was Paul? Where was Paul? Only 66 in the House voted against it as well. And this unleashed a stormtrooper mentality run amok with the Justice Department. They round up 5,000 immigrants in this country, mostly of Middle Eastern descent, and lock them up. They've still got almost 1,000 of them locked up, apparently, even now. Who are they? Where are they? Why are they there? Bush administration won't say. They say that, well, this Al-Qaeda thing is kind of like a mosaic. And we're trying to figure out which of these people fits in the mosaic. But so far, not one of them has been charged with fitting into the Al-Qaeda mosaic, and they're keeping them anyway. And the Justice Department says, oh, well, hey, if we get 50 informants out of these people, that's 50 more than we have now. Amnesty International has slapped our face over this, saying some of these people are being held without charge in solitary confinement, in chains, and not allowed to go outside or exercise, let alone call a lawyer or their own family. And if after a year of that, they're going to suddenly want to say, oh, I can hardly wait to be a narc for Bush. That does not seem realistic to me. And they've also said they're going to be trying people with military tribunals. String people up in other people's countries. Just grab them and right there on the spot, without them being able to present a defense or anything, start, if a little over half the majority of the military officers vote to kill the guy, they're going to kill him right then and there. No appeal, no constitutional rights to a fair trial, nothing. And and this violates the Geneva Convention, as does our kidnapping all these people out of Afghanistan and wherever, and locking them in human-sized rat cages out in the sun in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And we're building a huge new prison in Cuba, in Guantanamo Bay, to house all the other people we intend to kidnap and lock up and throw away the key in years to come. And guess who's going to build the prison? Halliburton Construction, heard of them? They're the construction company that mainly works for the oil industry, putting up the pipelines and the infrastructure to pull out the oil and everything. And until he went back into federal government, the CEO of Halliburton was none other than Dick Cheney. How corrupt is this? And how would we feel if Saddam Hussein, or even Canada, came into this country or into this room and just grabbed some people they didn't happen to like, tried them out in the street as terrorists with a military tribunal, blew them away, and went home? We would feel a little violated, wouldn't we? Like maybe this was more Gestapo than Uncle Sam, but you never know. And they define somebody that they can try this way as anybody that Rumsfeld or Bush or a minion declares to be a suspected terrorist. And a suspected terrorist is defined as somebody who attempts to, quote, influence the policy of a government, they don't say which one, by intimidation or coercion. Kind of like what we're doing to Iraq. Kind of like what we're doing to the Palestinians. Influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion. That's such a big umbrella, it could include anybody who marches on Saturday. Peaceful marches, sit-ins, boycotts, the kind of pranks I have such a soft spot in my heart for. They can use this for just about anything. And on top of that, the Patriot Act says that, and you know, again, I ask, where was Mr. Wellstone on this one? It says that the FBI can come into anybody's home, including yours, anytime they want to, not even have to get a warrant, just go through your stuff, search your computer files, search your hard drive, put a little cookie thing in there, and not even tell you they've been there. But if you find them there and tell somebody else, you can go to jail for that, too, under the Patriot Act. Not far behind is the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act that the House of Representatives just passed by a landslide. A life sentence for malicious hacking. And the Democrats have been busy too. That noted friend of the common man, Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware, has introduced the Reducing Americans' Vulnerability to Ecstasy Act, RAV, the RAVE Act. And under the RAVE Act, anybody who puts on this kind of an event, or as they put it, failure to keep party goers, at a party of any size, 4,000 to 40,000 people, failure to keep everybody from using or selling drugs, $250,000 fine, 20 years in jail. Better stick to child rape. You'll get off a lot easier. The House of Representatives has their Clean Up Act that says, this cleverly packaged brochure from your Green Governor candidate, Ken Pentel, or however you pronounce it, he's in the House. Because of the rules governing nonprofits in this state, we invited the Republicrats too. Paul, where are you? Not here. Anyway, I guess Mr. Pentel will be over at the booth or something if you want to talk to him or whatever you want to do there. And I do applaud the packaging on the brochures and the sign. That's hilarious. Hi, Ken. Yeah, no problem. I need to... Did you bring any voter registration forms?
Did you register day of the election?
Oh, you registered day of the election? Well, register now if you can, too.
Same day registration.
Same day registration. That's better than California. I mean, some of Bush's buddies are suing to stop the motor voter law in that state where you got a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote and all. They don't want that. House of Representatives is toying around with this law called the Clean Up Act that says any promoter of any event whatsoever who knows or ought to know anyone is high on anything gets the book thrown at them. Does this mean that you bust Ozzy and Sharon simply because Ozfest exists, even though Clear Channel's running it now? Or what happens if one person's smoking weed in the Metrodome during a Vikings game? Does Red McCombs, a Clear Channel owner, go down too? What if they catch Randy Moss with steroids in the dressing room or something? Doesn't say. And Ashcrack has also said that they want to basically bring back, well, I'll get to that in a minute. They're saying that they're going to be infiltrating political organizations to fight terrorism, and even infiltrating churches to look for terrorists. How close is this to the FBI infiltrating peace organizations and civil rights organizations in the 60s and 70s in order to try and sabotage the hell out of them and wipe them out? So, on that demonstration of the 26th, if people in masks show up who immediately want to break windows, might want to pull them off and see if it's a narc underneath. I'm dead serious. They were doing that in Italy in the Genova demonstrations and stuff. They decided to dress the cops like the Black Bloc and just get, so to the point where even when that didn't work, the black people who looked like Black Bloc were actually cops who were beating up the protesters and stuff. Like again, in the 60s, Students for a Democratic Society, a faction breaks off and starts bombing things called the Weathermen. And a lot of the Weathermen were undercover FBI agents. This is all part of a program called COINTELPRO, which also eventually escalated to the point where if they couldn't get people to shoot each other by putting false information out about each other, they went and killed Black Panther leaders, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in Chicago. They assassinated leaders of the American Indian movement, assassinated organizers of the Puerto Rican independence movement, and lo and behold, the COINTELPRO was never officially abolished. What the hell happened in Oakland, California several years ago when the car-carrying environmental activists, Judy Berry and Daryl Cherney of Earth First, blew up right in the middle of Oakland while they were driving down the street? FBI on the scene within minutes. That was interesting. And Daryl survived. Judy was maimed for life pretty bad. She literally had her butt blown off for all practical purposes and could not walk for very long periods and lived in serious pain the rest of her life until she died of breast cancer a few years ago. When the corporate media comes out and says, our polls show 85% of Americans think bringing back COINTELPRO type stuff is a wonderful idea. We need Pinochet in this country, in other words. Maybe you ought to stop and think that Judy Berry's estate and Daryl Cherney just won a $4 million judgment against the FBI for violating their civil rights. Such things as failure to investigate the bombing and charging Judy and Daryl with bombing themselves, and once they realized how ludicrous that was, they never pursued any other leads, including what their own people were doing, conducting a bomb school right in the middle of logging country during all the environmental protests of Redwood Summer in 1990. The same kind of bomb got used to try and kill Judy and Daryl a few weeks later. That has not yet been explained. So Ashcroft says, well, the best way to get rid of those judgments is just to legalize it all. Bring it all back. And the FBI is already trying to shake down libraries and bookstores, demanding lists of who is checking out or buying or reading which book. And Several places like Southwest Airlines and Northwest Airlines and Eli Lilly, among others, are firing employees if it turns out they have a small-time pot bust over 10 years old or something like that. Gotta get rid of them now. Other ways this has trickled down to the local level is in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have these trains called the BART trains, Bay Area Rapid Transit, that go under San Francisco and under the Bay over to Oakland and Berkeley and all. And now they've got cops with dogs on all the trains, going up and down with drug-sniffing dogs, just in case some terrorist has a doobie in their pocket. They're gonna smoke when they get home. The Denver, Colorado police were busted for having almost 10,000 people on file for such suspicious activity as attending an Amnesty International meeting, attending an American Friends Service Committee meeting. All of this now justified in the name of Homeland Security. Don't you just love that term, Homeland Security, Homeland? It makes you feel all Garrison Keillor-ish, doesn't it? The Homeland. And who do they get to run it but that clown of a governor from Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge, the one obsessed with trying to execute Mumia Abu-Jamal, and he couldn't even do that right, thankfully. Anyway, Tom Ridge, every time you see him with Bush, he's got that cartoon cop face straight out of a Cagney movie or something. The only thing that comes to mind with him is every time I see a picture of Tom Ridge, I think, Car 54, where are you? Oh, 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 mass executions through military tribunals. Oh, 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 we get to spy on everybody now. Oh, 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 Operation Tips. Oh, oh, oh. That's basically what Operation Tips is. I mean, even though even the House Republicans were against it because it was such a violation of privacy, Ashcroft won't give up yet. Basically, it's trying to get everybody who's like a UPS driver, mailman, working at the bus station, airline ticket counter people, whatever, to spy on everyone they come in contact with and report any potentially terrorist-related activity to, I guess, the Office of the Terrorist Information and Prevention System. TIPS, Totally Incompetent Police State, is another thing TIPS stands for. The logic seems to be that since this worked so well in East Germany that the Berlin Wall fell eventually, we need to try it out here. They had the Stasi over there, the secret police, and now they want the United Stasi of America, I guess. The Stasi was so widespread, once people got a look at the files, they realized that married couples were spying on each other, and all his friends were all spying on each other and everything, and just went on and on. I don't know whether we can get the entry to turn down a little bit, but it would probably come in handy here. Steve. Anyway, it's beginning to look a lot like 1984. Endless, endless war. Oh, Afghanistan is not enough. Remember, for a while they said we were going to invade Somalia next. You know, have some more Black Hawks go down just in case Bin Laden's hiding out there. We've already got troops that have snuck into Yemen. We've got some more in the Philippines, and a whole hundreds of what we call military advisors. That's what we called the initial troops stirring up trouble to get the Vietnam War started. Military advisors. Yeah, I'm serious. If anybody's working here, if there's any, I don't think anything's started down there yet. If we can, like, knock that down a little bit or something, that would be much appreciated. God, it sounds like pretty awful stuff, too. Worse still. It's bad enough that the term industrial music got robbed away from throbbing gristle and used to describe increasingly lame attempts at imitating Ministry and Nine Inch Nails. But now they call rhythm and blues R&B, this awful ballady shit. instead of Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and all that good stuff. Remember, and then they borrowed that term they used to use to describe the Cars and Pat Benatar and Blondie, alternatives. And then attached it again to Nirvana and Soul Asylum and everything. Ah, it appears the R&B has died down for now. Where were we? Military advisors. We put hundreds of them now to get things stirred up in Colombia, of all places, who's now the third biggest recipient of military aid from us behind Israel and Egypt, even though their army has the worst human rights record in all of the Americas now, and the right-wing paramilitary death squads they're buddies with are even worse. We're sending people in there, as Noam Chomsky puts it, we're not intervening to stop atrocities, we're intervening to escalate atrocities. I think maybe that's where they were planning to have the war before September 11th happened. And after all, they found oil way back in the jungle in the Andes, and there's pesky indigenous people occupying the land who don't want to leave their homeland. So, if we declare them terrorists and arm the death squads, we can get the oil out, and Halliburton has something new to do. State of the Union address earlier this year, Bush comes out with that juvenile remark about Iran, Iraq, and North Korea form an axis of evil. Those countries don't even get along with each other. Bush didn't even clear that with anybody at the State Department before he blurted it out on national television. And all we accomplished there was undermining all the moderate Iranians who were trying to whittle away at the dictatorial power of the Ayatollahs, and they've been set way back by that. President Kim Dae-jung of South Korea made more progress than anybody in 50 years in cooling things off and normalizing things with the admittedly nutcase regime of North Korea. They slammed the door in his face, and now he's not even running for re-election anymore. That's how much we accomplished with that. Then they reveal that somebody with way too much time on their hands at the Pentagon has been drawing up plans not just for how we're going to nuke Russia and how we would do a nuclear war on China or North Korea or Saddam Hussein, but you never know when you might need to bomb Syria and nuke Libya as well, just for good measure. And we even tried to overthrow a democratically elected government in South America a few months ago, tried to knock off President Hugo Chavez in Venezuela for the crime of spending too much of the country's oil money on his own people and daring to open dialogue with Castro and Saddam Hussein. Plus, if things go as badly as many predict they will with relations with other countries around Iraq, if we do a new bloodbath over there, we're going to need to occupy some country to take the oil out to power all our yuppie-mobile SUVs and everything. And Venezuela will keep the freight bill down. They're the 5th largest producer in the world. Let's just take them over. And to save the nuclear arms industry, now they're saying we need to build little fun-size, trick-or-treat bag-size nuclear bombs. Backpack nukes, as they're calling them. So you could take one out and roll it into a cave in Afghanistan, blow up the evil ones, and hopefully run down the mountain before the whole mountain comes down on top of you, and the one in the next valley, and the one in the next valley. After all, these tremors do travel. The last big earthquake in LA, and I think it was 1994, was the same day as an underground nuclear test in Nevada. Yet another important bit of information people like CNN and the USA Today did not see fit to tell the public. And most irresponsible of all, they're saying terrorism justifies us putting nuclear weapons in outer space, giving Reagan his Star Wars wet dream once and for all, even though it's $100 billion later, we can't figure out how to make them work. And several have gone up and blown and crashed, and you can still see him lifting off when he was standing in Hawaii. or wherever. But no, let's put them up there. A lot of good that would have done on September 11th, by the way. So what is this? Is this a defensive weapon? No, this is an offensive weapon. The Pentagon admits that. They say we desperately need to put nukes all over outer space for full spectrum dominance, they call it. Meaning that anybody from Hugo Chavez to Gerhard Schroeder in Germany to Saddam Hussein to some peasant in Chile who doesn't want McDonald's in their village gets a little too uppity for the Bush crowd, a laser beam's gonna come out of the sky and fry your ass right then and there. What happens if one of those malfunctions? What happens if it comes crashing back down to Earth like the Russian space station Mir did not very long ago? It's going to get hotter and hotter until it blows. And when one of those things blows, the plutonium payload is probably going to be big enough that there would be enough plutonium dust scattered all over the Earth's atmosphere to potentially cause cancer and kill every breathing critter left on the planet. But if it enriches Rumsfeld's friends, of course it's worth the risk, because then we're fighting terrorism. They've also said, oh, don't worry if something like that malfunctions and blows up our precious Bush administration when it misfires. Oh no, there's now a shadow government in place. Unnamed bureaucrats in unknown locations. Wonder if one of them was a DC sniper, who knows? I guess they claim they've caught that person now, but I kept thinking, what do you want to bet it's Jenna Bush? Off on a bender. What would happen if everything we knew about the man turned out to be wrong and it was Ian MacKay? He's a friend of mine, but I couldn't resist. Anyway, where were we? The shadow government. Don't we already have a shadow government? And their names are General Electric, General Motors, Shell Oil, Microsoft, IBM, Lockheed, Walmart, Blockbuster, Time Warner. There's your shadow government. We've also announced that, like the Geneva Convention and the Kyoto Treaty against global warming, none of that applies to us. It only applies to everybody else. And that means we're not going to have anything to do with the International Criminal Court. Everybody, including us, has worked so long to get set up to bring people like Milosevic and those responsible for the genocide in Rwanda and others to trial for their crimes against humanity. The Bush mob has announced that if they attempt to try an American in the International Criminal Court anywhere in the world, we will invade that country, which now puts us on record as threatening to invade Holland, where the International Criminal Court is going to be located. And that so-called moderate of the Bush mob, Colin Powell, called up the president of East Timor after they finally had a president and told him that if they agreed to join the other 140 nations, including every so-called democracy except us, and signed on to the International Criminal Court, we would deny them foreign aid completely. And guess what else we went and sabotaged in the way of international agreements? We pulled out of a treaty being negotiated not to manufacture biological weapons and germ bombs of mass destruction. We even pulled out of that because it, quote, did not protect U.S. interests, such as our desire to corner the market on bioterror weapons. Even now, the Office of Naval Research in Arlington, Virginia, wants to create genetically modified insects that will eat roads, runways, metals, paints, fuel, and then when they've eaten up all the enemy's stuff, then what are you going to feed them? They didn't think about that. And I also fear for all the Middle Eastern Americans and immigrants who came over here to escape the very kinds of evil one dictators that we now say we don't like, who are being subjected to an escalating amount of racism and repression in this country. Sometimes, I mean, even one of Bush's Secret Service guys was thrown off a plane in Baltimore because the other passengers were flipped out because he was Middle Eastern. And worse, I mean, there's been crimes all over the world now. I was in Scotland last year, and the same night I did my show, somebody firebombed the main local mosque. Tallahassee earlier this year, I get there, and a week earlier somebody drove their pickup truck into the front door of the mosque there. And right after September 11th, some poor guy who was opening his gas station for the first day of business in Mesa, Arizona, on the outskirts of Phoenix, truck pulls up and does a drive-by on it, kills it, blew his head off because it had a turban on it. The guy said he did it to stand up for America. And I also fear for what's going to happen to the veterans of the war on terrorism, too, and this whole new endless war. We have a great track record of rattling our swords and threatening people and pushing buttons to kill tens of thousands of peasants at a time, but we have a pretty poor record taking care of our own veterans when they come home from war, don't we? People in the street begging money in the street, sitting there with signs saying, "Homeless Viet vet will work for food." That never should have happened. And what about Agent Orange? We won't even cop to that yet. All the veterans who got sick with cancer and had horribly deformed children and all, dwarfed by the number of people still being poisoned and still having deformed babies in Vietnam to this day because we couldn't be bothered to go clean up the Agent Orange. And we won't even cop to Gulf War syndrome either. All these troops welcome home with yellow ribbons and medals no matter what they did and all, then fuck them, basically. When they start having double vision, splitting headaches, spaz attacks, more cancer, more horribly deformed babies, the government's response is, it's all in your head. It's all a coincidence. There ain't no Gulf War syndrome. Where obviously there is. The guy they just busted for being a sniper in D.C. was a Gulf War veteran. And more to the point, what caused all the physical ailments where all these people can't work anymore and are basically disabled or just put on some kind of disability, barely surviving? Was it the anthrax vaccine that we shot all the soldiers up with, even though it had never been tested on humans? We're now going to do it with smallpox for the new war, by the way. Same situation. Or was it all the pollutants from all those oil wells blown up by Saddam Hussein and, of course, ourselves? Or was it real germ bombs being used by Saddam? Or was it the germ bomb stuff that escaped into the atmosphere when we blew up 5 chemical weapons plants in Iraq and blew up a nuclear reactor too? All that dust is going to go somewhere, including the plutonium. Plus, we were fooling around over there with shells coated with depleted uranium. And granted, they'll go right through a tank, blow it up from the inside, but what have you got left over? Radiation. We thought it was a dandy idea to use that in Kosovo, too. Hey, Kosovars, look! We got rid of Milosevic's butchers and left your land with a happy glow. You can come on back now. And I fear that after we've blown up and killed every living thing in Afghanistan and Iraq, Osama bin Laden will emerge on the mount from the one cave we forgot about and tell his then mushrooming following, "I told you so." Even if we succeed in wiping out the millions of people who already agree with him, what will their kids be like? What will their children be like? Look no further than how young those boys throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers are. There's your answer. There's got to be a better way. I wish I knew what it was. It's now over a year since September 11th, and none of our lives will ever be the same. I got the word in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, of all places, when a friend of mine woke me up out of some badly needed beauty sleep with a telephone call. Is the show going to go on at the university that night? What are you calling at 9 o'clock in the morning to ask me that for, man? Don't you realize civilized people don't get up till 2? But haven't you been watching the news? No, man, I was asleep. Well, 2 hijacked planes crashed into the World Trade Center and another one hit the Pentagon. Really? Ah. Call you later, go back to bed. Couldn't sleep, so I turned on the TV. As soon as it came on, there it was, across the bottom of the screen. World Trade Center destroyed. Both buildings collapsed. And then it hit me. Oh, shit. Like the San Francisco earthquake and my little sister's death, the true heavy magnitude of the event just avalanched by the hour and wouldn't stop. Of course, the show was canceled, that part of the tour was canceled. No flights out of Alabama. I offered to go on the college radio station at the University of Alabama and say a few words if they thought it would help. They did not. And my friends from Atlanta called back and offered to make the 3 to 4 hour drive out so we could be together as all the horror unfolded. And somehow I guess we knew we needed each other's company, and I'm really grateful they came. We thought, so this is what other people go through in other parts of the world, sometimes on a daily basis, like Israel, where the everyday act of getting on the bus or sitting down to eat your lunch is risking a death sentence. Or Palestine, or Iraq, who we've never stopped bombing, or Sarajevo, or Belgrade, or Chechnya, or Kosovo, or Belfast. Up till now, we've been pretty damn lucky. Now we've joined the rest of the world's 21st century. I'm still amazed that with all the thousands of highly skilled explosives experts trained by our military, we've only had one Timothy McVeigh, let alone one DC sniper. It's just because we've been pretty damn lucky, that's all. And as we sat there in Alabama, we saw how the corporate-controlled mass media slowly but surely fanned the fires for war on the television screen. You could tell when they turned up the burners an extra notch by the change of the disaster logo behind the newscaster on the screen. Have you noticed how every disaster and scandal has its own logo now? And in the case of the sniper on CNN, its own music theme too, its own little jingle and all. I wonder who the author was of, instead of theme from Friends, theme from sniper attacks. Some lucky web geek got the job to design all those logos on the spur of the moment. You can see how it changed through America, America under attack, tragedy in New York, to America's new war. And over again, you'd see the second plane hitting the South Tower, kaboom, different angle, kaboom, another one, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Every time CNN got new footage, they'd show kaboom, and then show all the other kabooms they had in the trophy room, more than any other network. See? Keep watching CNN. And over again, the building's collapsing, silently. Even though in New York it was so loud it registered on the Richter scale, silently, with a little tinkly John Teshoid New Agey piano music in the background, over and over and over again. You couldn't help but react. You couldn't help but be upset, wondering what it would be like to be on one of those planes. And I hate turbulence bad enough as it is, but finding out in 10 minutes you're going to die or whatever, being trapped on the upper floors, being trapped on the lower floors, and down comes the building on top of you. Or if you know somebody who might be trapped in one of the buildings, you couldn't help but react and want to fight back and do something and get back at these people. But we also had to stop and remember all the times our beloved corporate media has used false images in a situation like that to lead people like a Pied Piper over the cliff to war. First up on September 11th was the celebrating Palestinians dancing in the street on CNN, seemingly just jubilant that all those innocent people got killed when the towers went down. And some have alleged this footage was actually from 1991. Others insist that it was real. However, the woman with a big shit-eating Cheshire Cat grin in the front of the picture had on Peggy Hill glasses, which were pretty far out of vogue even in 1991. Gulf War #1, even worse. After we weren't sufficiently outraged at Saddam Hussein, since we'd never really heard of him or Kuwait before, if all we were exposed to was our straight media and our school system and all, well, all of a sudden to get people riled up, it was splattered across the news that Saddam Hussein's savage army was storming hospitals in Kuwait City, dumping premature babies out of incubators and leaving them to die on the floor as they ran off with the hospital equipment. And they trotted out some seemingly shell-shocked young Kuwaiti woman to testify before Congress and thus the media as well. Please save our country! Look what they're doing there! They're savages! You've got to save us from this butchers! Please, America, help save Kuwait for democracy! Turned out, the story was planted and that woman hired by the Hill and Knowlton Lobbying Agency, employed by the Kuwaiti royal family to persuade the American people that it was in their best interest to launch a full-scale war in the Middle East just to put them back on their throne. Democracy be damned. The woman, it turned out, was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States in D.C. And before that, anybody remember the story of the Libyan hit squad? The Libyan hit squad, who according to all the papers and the media had been sent into this country. They'd infiltrated America and they were stalking Ronald Reagan. And they were going to assassinate Ronald Reagan if we didn't all help find the Libyan hit squad. Illustrations of them were splashed across the papers. I wanted to use that as a promo photo for dead Kennedys, but got shot down on that one, no pun intended. Turned out the Libyan hit squad didn't even exist. It was cooked up in the White House basement by a then obscure military officer with dubious morals named Oliver North. He made the whole thing up. So with that in mind, a piece of me at least has to ask, does Osama bin Laden even exist? We never found him, did we? And what a convenient cartoon villain for everybody to hate and vent their racism on. The turban, the beard, the eyes, and everything else. Yes, folks, this horrible thing that was meticulously planned was all the handiwork of some crackpot in a cave in the poorest country in the world. Well, we spent so much time trying to pin it all on one evil boogeyman rather than look beneath the surface or get the American people to do any reflecting. We spent it all on this big evil boogeyman to the point where we made Osama bin Werewolf an overnight pop star all over the Middle East. They have his picture on bags of candy in Pakistan now. They sell Elvis posters of him in the streets there, too, with towers blowing and planes exploding up above his grinning image. And you can even get Osama bin Laden's cell phones, where a picture of him comes on a little screen and morphs into a plane, hitting a building that blows up and collapses, and then morphs into bin Laden again. Other people see this differently than we do. But Bush and Tony Blair carry on. We have to go kill Saddam Hussein and blow up Iraq because of secret evidence. They say they have secret evidence to justify their scam. If they really had any evidence, would they be sitting on it now? I don't think so. And think back to the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964. Even worse example. Supposedly North Vietnamese gunboats fired on American ships and President Lyndon Johnson rammed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution through yet another lapdog Republican Congress. Only one senator voted against it. And that unleashed the floodgates of us going in and invading Vietnam. Look what we got out of that war. Longest and least successful in our history, almost 60,000 Americans killed, dwarfed by the estimated death toll in Vietnam of 2 to 3 million people. And of course, many more people in this country, the veterans of that war, including some of your own parents, I suspect, never quite the same again. And now, corporate media acknowledges, even acts as if it's no big deal, that the Gulf of Tonkin incident basically never happened. So watch out for that stuff. And with that in mind, what was the Gulf War #1 really for, anyway? Maybe. I know, I put out the Die for Oil Sucker single at the time, which I hope I don't have to reissue soon, but thinking back, what do oil companies care if they're buying the crude from the dictator of Iraq or the dictator of Kuwait? They're businessmen. OPEC sets the price. Who cares? But at the same time, we had all these fancy new weapons we could show off. See, look at them B-1 bombers. See, look at those Batman planes, the stealth bombers. Ooh, you can't see them, can you? Unless you're one of Milosevic's soldiers who shot that one down during the Kosovo invasion. Look at all this fancy new artillery. Look at our depleted uranium shells that blow tanks to smithereens from the inside. Look at all this great new weapons of mass destruction, and they're all for sale. Yes, oil sheiks. Yes, dictators and other heads of state. If you don't buy them, someone else will. Maybe that's what the Gulf War really was about, a giant infomercial for our weapons industry. After all, since the Gulf War, our share of the world arms market has gone from 18 to 50% and growing. So the Pentagon has now enlisted Jerry Bruckheimer, the film producer who gave us Top Gun and Black Hawk Down and other classics of the silver screen like Coyote Ugly, to team up with a guy named Bertram Van Munster. I kid you not. He's considered the brains behind that charming television show, Cops, to make a new Cops, a reality TV show in cop style with American soldiers going and killing evil ones in other countries to be shown on prime time television. And Bruckheimer said, we want this to be a recruiting tool for the U.S. military. And the Pentagon has hired their own publicist called the Rendon Group to help promote and sanitize the war. But it's worth noting that even Black Hawk Down and Behind Enemy Lines and the Nicolas Cage one that just came out on video, all these rah-rah war movies coming out in the past couple years, just in time for a war, were in production when Clinton was still president. Just like Alias and 24 and The Agency, those were all cooked up earlier. A friend of mine, I found out in LA, a friend of mine is one of the set builders now for The Agency, and he's getting torn up inside because look who he's working for. He says that CIA people come on set continually to double check the script and offer pointers and make sure they're always portrayed in a positive light. and that the current CIA director made a conscious decision, we have an image problem, this is how we should correct it. James Garner, the Rockford Files kid with the ever-changing hair on Alias, Jennifer Garner or whatever. That'll make the CIA look more heroic every time. Yum, yum. And we have a Ministry of Truth now, too. Just like 1984, Rumsfeld called it the Office of Strategic Influence. And their mission was to be to deliberately plant false stories in the media of other countries, even friendly countries, if we thought it would serve U.S. interests. Enough of a backlash on that Rumsfeld announced a week later that he was closing the office. Which story is true? Especially considering that a little bit later they opened the Information Awareness Office, with a mission almost identical to the Office of Strategic Influence, and guess who they hired to run it? John Poindexter, arch criminal of Countergate, Ollie North's right-hand man in all the assassinations and the killing and the drug running that led to the crack epidemic in South Central LA, as documented in a book called Dark Alliance by Gary Webb. Well, we're bringing him back too. So when they suddenly find the smoking gun to go kill Saddam, what do you want to bet it came from the same fertile soil as the Libyan hit squad? Ollie and Poindexter and all. And they've already been continually announcing, oh, we had our 7th one just recently, didn't we? Another announcement, there's going to be another terrorist attack in 5 days. What was that one? Around March sometime? Well, maybe there's going to be one there. Remember last year that the big bad wolf was going to come and bomb Halloween, too. Blow up the malls. And they were going to blow up 4th of July and rain on our parade and all. And it never seems to happen. And they initially said that 100,000 Al-Qaeda terrorists had gone through those camps in Afghanistan, and now the total they're saying of people who were actually led into the organization was 300. Took them a while to admit that, too. And just to make sure we were still cowering under our beds, biting our nails over the next terrorist attack, when we were not looking, when Congress rams through the Patriot Act and Mr. Wellstone forgets to vote against it and all. 2001, an anthrax odyssey. Never did I think that all I would have to do for entertainment would be to go to the grocery store, look at bags of flour, think evil thoughts, and start laughing. Hey, all you ex-members of Dead Kennedys who are still suing the shit out of me because I wouldn't put a song in a Levi's commercial. Powdered sugar. Do I need to go into that at all? Or yes, no, yes, yes.
What about Tony Hawk?
Oh, Tony Hawk? Yeah, that was a little behind my back, too. I mean, I didn't know I was going to be in the game, too, let alone that the other 3 would run off with all the money like they do with everything now. But anyway, what they did was, after I opposed putting Holiday in Cambodia in a Levi's Dockers TV commercial, they went running to a corporate lawyer who's apparently represented Boston, Journey, Doobie Brothers, Carlos Santana, other noted grassroots punk consciousness figures like a woman who wants Jerry Garcia's estate money all for herself and all. And they filed a big-ass lawsuit against me, wouldn't compromise, refused to settle the thing, dragged me through a 3-week jury trial where Ray, Klaus, and D.H. Peligro went up one by one on the witness stand and lied, under oath, claiming that they wrote all the music to the songs, After all, he couldn't have written any of the songs we credited him with all those years because he doesn't play an instrument, and worse yet, jury, he doesn't read sheet music. Said that with a straight face. And they claimed that I plotted all these years to hide their precious royalty money from them, and worse yet, spend money they thought should be theirs helping out other bands. Like No Means No, and the Early On Butthole Surfers, Wesley and Willis. Victim's Family, Neurosis. We even put out the first Husker Du album overseas originally. And of course the new bands like Phantom Limbs and the Fleshies, Ayahuasca and Flaming Stars from England, and Slim Cessna's Auto Club and others. All of that money, including the money spent putting out their solo stuff, which they also wanted damages because it didn't sell as much as Dead Kennedys did, all that money should have gone into their pocket. Something no record label would ever do if they wanted to survive and everything. You have to pay to make the stuff, and people to run the office and everything. They wanted they wanted damages because it all didn't go into their three pockets. Granted, there was an accounting error, and neither side could figure out why the numbers and the royalties didn't quite match. They couldn't, we couldn't. Finally, when we, not they, discovered what it was and paid them, then after they got the money, they sued. Then they sued. And they called up as an expert witness an accountant from Grateful Dead Records, of all people, who testified that as an expert on promotion, as so many accountants are, that I should be forced to pay them $500,000 in damages for failure to promote them. Because the people who now claim they wrote MTV Get Off the Air themselves were not on MTV for the past 15 years after the band broke up. They wanted damages for not regularly appearing in Rolling Stone, and Spin, and damages for not being on VH1. And to their own visible shock, the jury believed them. And so now I have been hit with over $200,000 in damages. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to pay. And I mean, their goal is to wipe out alternative tentacles. They've said that and all. But anyway,
Send some powdered sugar!
Well, on top of the damages, they were awarded all the rights to everything to do with Dead Kennedys, and are now claiming they own my name, my songs, my face, my voice, my artwork, the recordings, everything else, and have pimped it down the river to this label called Manifesto, who I don't support or endorse or in any way. And Fresh Fruit got pimped off to somebody called Cleopatra, who also puts out people like The Exploited and all. And then their lawyer sent me a little note saying, okay, now we're not going to pay you a dime on anything anymore. Just going to keep it ourselves. Unless you cough up $140,000 more dollars, which we claim as a band member, that's your share of our legal bill to sue you. That's how greedy they are. Meanwhile, and that also means if you see stuff on Manifesto or Cleopatra in the stores, just keep in mind the mentality behind it and where the money's really going before you let that in your front door. A band member, when they want to illegally shake me down for their own lawyers' fees, I'm not a band member at their fake reunion shows they're doing now. You heard about those? They have an old TV child star who's practically my age, Brandon Cruz from The Courtship of Eddie's Father. Let me tell you about my best friend. And what a friend he is, too. He hasn't bothered learning the lyrics to the songs. He just mumbles them or gets them wrong. They seem to think that's a funny thing that's going on. And that Klaus bragged at a show in San Francisco that they'd only rehearsed twice, ever. And a lot of these shows are advertised as all original members. We're putting an old photo of the band with me in it in all the ads. And thank you to this place and others in Minneapolis for not falling for that little scam. And according to a letter we got from Virginia, Brandon Cruz on stage called me a terrorist and compared me to Osama bin Laden and said that, you know, I didn't love my country because I wasn't going along with Bush. And then Peligro came out and dedicated Holiday in Cambodia to our troops overseas. They actually supported the war in Afghanistan. So to try and put a stop to this, I have filed an appeal against that evil jury verdict. Which, even though I'm many hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from this hell, I mean, that's going to make it worse. Oh, on top of that, they're suing me again now. They just filed a new one against me for interfering with their profiteering off dead Kennedys. So, to fight all this stuff, we've started the Alternative Tentacles Legal Defense Fund to raise money to help pay for the appeal and keep Alternative Tentacles and myself from winding up pushing a grocery cart and sleeping in the park every night, basically. So, we'll get to that. Anyway, what, you a foot fetishist guy over there? Are you as into smelly feet as my cat is? Ooh, DOA, smelly boots. Anyway, if you want to help out the Defense Fund, you can find it at our website, alternativetentacles.com, or send something to our mailing address, whatever, anything appreciated. And hopefully, no more on this subject tonight.
Hire the sniper.
Jenna! Oh, Jenna! I've got a whole six-pack of Coors Light just for you. And we know how much your family loves pretzels. Don't you want to join my other charity drive to make sure a dump truck full of pretzels arrives at the White House every day as our subtle hint to the imposter-in-chief and all? But meanwhile, we do indeed have got a bigger problem now. Why Iraq? Why now? Bush says it's because we need to have a preemptive war. We need to attack them just in case they might attack us someday. Isn't that the excuse Hitler used when he invaded Poland and France and Czechoslovakia and Austria and the rest? The UN knows that full well. That's why it's in the UN Charter that we mostly wrote, no preemptive wars. But the UN apparently doesn't apply to Bush and his cowboys either, because they say we need regime change. Don't you just love that term, regime change? Why that regime? Why right this minute? Don't other countries need a regime change too? Like Saudi Arabia? Like Israel? Like China? Like the United States of America? And I just don't mean replacing W with Al Gore and his lovely wife Tipper and all. I mean replacing the whole corporate-owned Republicrats and throwing them out and getting in a new party consisting of people who actually give a damn about this country. In stopping global warming and combating homelessness instead of Saddam Hussein, and you know, want to clean up our environment and make sure the income is a little more equal and everything else, and are more interested in that than what Wall Street thinks about their next move. In other words, you know, I am a registered member of the Green Party and have been for many years before before they outed me when the New York State Green Party nominated me for president along with Ralph Nader, which I couldn't really run. I was about to be dragged through that trial by my evil former bandmates, but I left my name on the ballot hoping that other people would then notice, would be inspired to go check out the Greens websites, figure out who Ralph Nader is, who the Greens were, and even though maybe Ralph didn't win nationally, start acting locally, where a lot of the real action is. I mean, even if you don't get a Green governor or a Green senator, you know, it doesn't mean you've lost, it just means you've widened the base of the pyramid for the next election. And meanwhile, at the local level, hardly anybody shows up and votes for elections for city council, school board, state legislature. That means that the more of us who show up, the more likely we are to get cool people elected to those local offices. And it's the locals who decide what to do with all our tax money collected by the state and federal government. Should we use this grant money for homeless shelters or a golf course? Or should we just use everybody's tax money to build a new publicly funded stadium for the Twins because the owner is blackmailing the people? There's been some ugly shit with stadiums over recent years, and if there is a vote for a publicly funded stadium, baseball or football, on the ballot, that's why you gotta show up. We voted the Giants down 4 times for a publicly funded stadium. Actually, only 2 in San Francisco, and they said, okay, we get the message. We're moving to San Jose. San Jose votes them out of town. Okay, we're moving to Palo Alto. Silicon Valley will give us money. No, we won't, said the voters. So finally, they put out a ballot that they would pay for the stadium, and then it got voted in. The city still had to pay an awful lot of money for other, you know, street changes and freeway exits and everything else, but there was a hell of a lot better than just coughing up money to some millionaire just to put up a monument to his greed and build the stadium with public money at a time when, according to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, homelessness went up 13% last year alone. Thanks in large part to Clinton and Gingrich getting together and ramming through that welfare bill back in 1996 that took everybody's benefits away after 5 years and all. Anyway, where were, oh yes, regime change, yes. Oh, and also, didn't I hear that this greedy crybaby owner of the Twins, your baseball team, is one of the richest baseball owners of them all? And just like the owner of the Seattle Seahawks, who's number 2 at Microsoft, so you can imagine how many billions he has, he wouldn't pay for the stadium. He made the public pay for it just so they would do this to how wonderful he was. Otherwise, I'm moving the Seahawks to L.A. L.A. is not going to root for the Seattle Seahawks for a football team. I'm sorry. Ain't going to work that way. The owner of the Denver Broncos, their football team, did that too and got $400 million plus public money to put up a new stadium for the Broncos, now known as the Diaphragm. Then, the name got sold off to the Invesco Corporation for $120 million. Was that money given back to the city of Denver for paying for the stadium? No. It was all taken by the Denver Broncos Football Company, which, as far as I know, the sole owner is one guy, Pat Bolin, a greedy little oil baron in a full fur coat from Calgary. He took the money. This is why voting is important, and not to let stuff like this happen. Anyway, Bush justifies regime change because Saddam Hussein is an evil man. That little grin on his face and all, I saw that. Well, I agree he is an evil man, and I'm glad I don't live in Iraq or I'd be dead long ago, and so would most of you, but he is the same evil man that he has been for the past dozen years when he did not attack us or his neighbors, The same evil man he was throughout the 1980s when we gave him tons of weapons of mass destruction and sold him anthrax even, just so long as he'd keep waging a war against Iran, who we were mad at because their people overthrew the Shah and all. Same guy. Now he has to die because he possesses the weapons we gave him. Interesting. Scott Ritter was the chief weapons inspector for the United Nations in Iraq from the end of the Gulf War up until 1998, when the weapons inspectors got kicked out because some of them were caught spying for the United States. Suddenly they won't let him on TV. They won't let him talk to Congress because he's been saying, yes indeed, when we got there, the Iraqis lied like hell. They kept hiding their weapons. We'd find a little bit of something you could make a chemical weapon out of or a nuclear bomb. We'd figure out where they got it from, check all the receipts and everything, go to the people who made it, find out how much they really sold to Iraq. Okay, where's the rest? No, where's the rest? Okay, here's some more paperwork. Now, where's the rest? And this went on and on for 7 years. And in his estimation, the United Nations was pretty well done by that time, having destroyed, in his estimation, 90 to 95% of Saddam Hussein's weapons capability. He feels the rest was probably destroyed during the Gulf War. And he says even if they still had any leftover sarin gas or tabo gas, 5-year shelf life, no good anymore. Anthrax long died off. U.S. intelligence even admits at the present time Iraq has no nuclear weapons capability whatsoever. After all, we destroyed most of it. And on top of that, even the Pentagon is now saying, Bush is saying, oh, well, don't worry about a bunch of our people getting killed like in Vietnam at all. We'll only kill other people. That's how we run our wars now, and even if our people do die, you'll never have to hear about it on the news, will you? And besides, the Iraqi army, exhausted, limp, at the end of their ropes, and so sick of Saddam Hussein they'd switch sides in a second. Does this sound like an immediate threat to our national security to you? And one person who should know in the Pentagon has described Iraq this way recently. He called it a country that has probably got military capabilities something like 40% of what it had 10 years ago, and ours are much more lethal. Guess who said that? Ronald Rumsfeld, our Secretary of Defense. So again, why now? Well, Andrew Card, Bush's chief of staff, says, get this is a real quote, from a marketing point of view, you don't introduce new products in August. That is how ice cold they are about this. Meanwhile, Harper's Magazine, if you've ever seen Harper's, they have this thing on the first page called Harper's Index with all these mind-blowing little facts, figures, numbers, and statistics. Last April, I think it was, they published this one, amount we spend guarding our oil supply in the Persian Gulf every year, $50 billion. Meanwhile, value of the crude oil that we actually use from the Persian Gulf, $19 billion. What is wrong with this picture? Well, in 1991, according to the LA Times, the Pentagon commissioned this study that they called the National Security Guideline, the threats to our wonderful country in the years ahead. And it was written by Paul Wolfowitz and Louis Libby, who goes by the nickname of Scooter. Wolfman and Scooter are yet two more chicken hawks who weaseled out of having to go to Vietnam like the peasants did. Yet they came up with this phone book-sized document, wildly paranoid on how, thanks to the Soviet evil empire and communism collapsing, the world was a vastly more dangerous place. And And we should now look at all our allies as, quote, potential competitors who had to be prevented from, quote, aspiring to a larger regional or global role than we had in mind for them. And they said U.S. military intervention should be, quote, a constant feature of global affairs. Are these guys in the loony bin yet? I mean, this is foreign policy by road rage instead of diplomacy. No. Wolfman is number 2 to Rumsfeld at Department of Defense and widely believed to be the guy who brought Iraq back onto the front burner, and Scooter is Cheney's chief of staff. The curse of the Wolfman is upon us. And maybe this mentality goes a long way towards explaining why every time we invade a country over there, we never leave. We've put up military bases in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar, in the Gulf. We put one or two up in Afghanistan. Others are being put up in the ex-Soviet republics that have just become countries right above Afghanistan, like Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, another up in Kazakhstan above there, being constructed by Halliburton, by the way. Bases in Turkey, put them up in Pakistan, where we agreed to let them go on with their nuke program and not bitch about it if they let us occupy the country with the military bases, thus helping precipitate a near-nuclear war between Pakistan and India last spring. And again, I was overseas when that happened. I'm surprised hardly anybody heard about that here. But anyway, we keep coming to visit and deciding to stay. Why? Especially because that $19 billion worth of crude is only 5% of the oil we use in this country. Why is that 5% so important? Maybe it's because of the curse of the Wolfman. We want to occupy that area just like we did with Europe and NATO, so if anybody in Europe gets a little uppity and demands a greater say in global affairs, Europe, Japan, China, whoever, you do anything we don't like, look at our bases. We're going to cut off your oil supply. And we're going to have you by the nuts, Star Wars or no Star Wars, forever and ever and ever. That's the scam. Anyway, after September 11th, 5 days later, I went overseas to Europe on September 16th to do a tour there, and I was stunned by how much better the media was over there. The quality of the news coverage about September 11th was over there than it has been over here. So much more detail. So many more sides of the arguments presented, so much more historical background and different predictions of what the future might hold and how risky Bush's policies were even before they got as wild as they are now. And I came back over here about 6-7 weeks later and was amazed at all these things I thought everybody knew and hardly anybody did. Again, I see all these blank faces when I talk about how a nuclear war damn near went down between India and Pakistan last May. Obviously, things like Robert Blake getting busted for murder were much more important in the media over here. I mean, I used to joke about how the more corporations take over and control our mass media, such as General Electric, one of the world's largest arms manufacturers, buying NBC, and its executives having editorial control over NBC News, thus all the slanted Gulf War coverage, and currently and all, but so much more dumbing down of our news. I joked it was turning into like Pravda, that old daily paper from the dark days of communism in the Soviet Union, where people got 8 pages a day, no more, of all the news they were allowed to know. Well, we're there, folks. We're there. I mean, all these other things going on in the world, and even a lot of hard news in the New York Times and papers here, sniper this, Saddam Hussein that. But meanwhile, our own Pravda, the USA Today, This is my favorite headline of theirs in years. Of all things to prioritize, weekend plans fall victim to sniper fears. Oh no! They didn't just get the World Trade Center, they're gonna get the weekend! Ah! USA Today once ran a main headline saying, "Survey proves most Americans love their jobs." Yeah. Anyway, couldn't believe how much better it was over there. Even mainstream conservative pro-business daily papers in England couldn't read the German ones or the Dutch ones because of the language, but I was told they were as good as well. And no doubt in France as well, and the others. Anyway, the English language ones, even conservative mainstream ones like the Times in London or the Independent, or even the right-wing Weekly World Newsy ones like the Daily Mirror, even their coverage was better quality than the New York Times or the Washington Post or whoever. The best one in England I thought was the Guardian, who you can check them out, by the way. They have a website you can log on to at guardian.co.uk. And this isn't an underground rag, it's one of the biggest mainstream daily papers in Europe, and still the quality was just astonishing on it. And whenever Bush or Rumsfeld start talking about how everybody loves the war now, let's go kill Iraq and everything, see what the Guardian has to say. It didn't, the stuff that came out over there that hasn't made it over here, here's a good one. Crown Prince Abdullah, Saudi Arabia, the guy who really runs the country now that King Fahd is so senile, he watches cartoons all day for the most part. Anyway, he came over to talk turkey with Bush for a quick meeting at the ranch in Crawford, Texas and all. And once he got back to Europe, he said in the most diplomatic way possible, he could not believe how clueless Bush was about the Middle East. Instead of the little half-hour photo op, handshaking, and talk for a few minutes and leave, he had to sit there for 4 or 5 hours giving Bush a little show-and-tell demonstration on why Palestinians were upset with the Israelis. He couldn't believe it. Other things that were reported over there that when I came back I thought everybody knew over here, they were like, what? Never knew any of that happened. Guardian reported not once, but twice, about an informal diplomatic meeting in a hotel room in Berlin in July of 2001, a couple months before September 11th. The United States there, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Northern Alliance, Taliban invited, declined to attend, and at that meeting, according to the Guardian, the U.S. representative came right out and said, "We're getting ready to invade Afghanistan and take out Osama bin Laden." And didn't seem to care if the Pakistani representative took that news back to Afghanistan and told the Taliban, which the Guardian reported that he did. Also interesting, in light of these so-called air restrictions after September 11th, we did let a chartered Saudi airliner plane come in and hop around the country, picking up various members of the bin Laden family to fly them safely home before the FBI could talk to them. And how many of you know that the Bush family and the bin Laden family have a business relationship dating back almost 25 years?
Yeah!
One of W's partners in his very first business venture, Arbusto Energy, was Salem bin Laden, Osama's older brother. And another way they connect is through this company called the Carlyle Group, the 11th largest defense contractor in the United States now. And they don't really make much stuff like Lockheed or General Dynamics or somebody. They go around buying up other floundering manufacturers of weapons of mass destruction, and then they either write them on, get them back on their feet financially, and either sell them or keep them in the portfolio before they move on to another host. Head of Carlyle is another guy who should still be in jail for Contragate, Frank Carlucci, one of the last defense secretaries of the Reagan-Bush regime. James Baker, King George I's Secretary of State and campaign dirty tricks specialist who helped fix the Florida election for Georgie Jr. when things got a little funny in 2000. He's on the board of Carlyle. Fidel Ramos, ex-president of the Philippines, he's working for Carlyle. John Major, who succeeded Thatcher as conservative prime minister for England, he works for Carlyle. Colin Powell was working for Carlyle, giving speeches on their behalf before he became Secretary of State. And King George I, George Bush Sr., gets $800,000 of Carlyle stock per appearance when he makes a speech on their behalf. And according to Michael Moore, when he goes over to Saudi Arabia to drum up business for Carlyle, guess where he crashes? The Bin Laden family palace. And the Bin Laden family also had millions invested in Carlyle before somebody shined a light on it last October and they pulled it out and went back to Saudi Arabia. Very interesting. Also interesting, on September 11th was the Punditoid, an expert witness sweepstakes, where different networks were dredging up different former members of the Reagan and first Bush administrations, some Clinton people too, to talk as experts on the air, and I was channel surfing the whole time. I thought on September 11th, CBS did the best job, CNN number 2, rock bottom was Fox News. There's a surprise. They could not get past things like, well, will this take America's minds off of Chandra Levy? How does this compare to the Monica Lewinsky crisis? Other networks were digging up Henry Kissinger and his protege, the old Secretary of State, Lawrence Eagleburger, looking even more like Jabba the Hutt than ever. Kissinger and Eagleburger are both against a new Iraq war, by the way. Even General Norman Schwarzkopf, who headed the forces there, has come out against a new war in Iraq. And if I forget to say it later, have you noticed how nobody else in the world is down with us this time? We have Tony Blair. We have Bulgaria. But Blair is in trouble with his own party over this. And and some of his own cabinet is even coming after him now. So he's on really shaky ground. But Germany, Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder gets his party to retain power, even though they were 15 points behind in the pre-election polls. Right before the election, he comes out explicitly and again against going into Iraq. Woo! Wins the election. France, totally opposed. Russia, totally opposed. China, hell no. Guess who else is opposed? Saudi Arabia says no. Even Kuwait and Afghanistan have come out against a new American invasion of Iraq. That's how lonely we are in this one. Meanwhile, what was interesting about the Punditoids they put on the TV on September 11th was all these government heavyweights, what came out of their mouths when they didn't have their cue cards ready and had all their statements cleared through official channels. James Woolsey, Clinton's first director of the CIA, he was sitting in there in a chair, slumped over, looking like Yoda in a really bad mood, saying, yeah, well, if the FBI and the grand jury in New York City had shared with us at the CIA everything they knew about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, we could have been tracking all these people, we could have been taking care of them, so to speak, and maybe none of this would have happened at all. That was interesting. Right there on national television, they admit that we're wasting hundreds of billions of dollars on 13 different intelligence agencies who don't even get along with each other. They don't share information, they have turf wars, they have hissy fits with each other, which in the age of ash crack may not be a bad thing for us, but very interesting nonetheless. Then, September 11th, there he is, looking even more like a deer caught in the headlights than usual. Have you noticed that no matter how they package him, even now, he gives off this vibe like he knows he doesn't belong where he is? All day, September 11th. Where's George? Oh, he's hiding in Louisiana in case Osama bin Werewolf has another plane. Oh no, we took him to Nebraska to keep him safe. And we in Tuscaloosa are thinking, oh no, he's up in the Bush family palace in Kennebunkport, Maine.
Hey, Pop! You told me this job was going to be easy. What do I do now?
Hasn't anybody noticed that this guy is no smarter than he was on September 10th of last year? My first exposure to the pest was when I was watching the Republican National Convention. He was doing his acceptance speech in Philadelphia, summer of 2000, and he came across like this spoiled rich frat boy trying to get on the college debate team or something. Podium, this plastic, marbly looking thing was even too big for him, saying,
"Make America strong and America proud. I will restore honesty and dignity to the Oval Office."
Then he came right out and said on national television,
Don't mess with Texas.
I hope that's not what this war is really about. Our commander-in-chief leading us into war is the same one who called people from Greece Grecians. Kosovians, called Jimmy Carter a European-style socialist, who thought Friends was a movie and the Taliban was a rock band. During the 2000 campaign, he was asked what his favorite book was, and he could not come up with one. He blurted out a title of a children's book that he said affected him deeply when he was a kid, and it turned out the book was published in the mid-60s while he was going to Yale. He was asked how he might get along with Prime Minister Poutine in Canada.
Oh yeah, we get along fine. We're old friends. We go back a long way.
That's not the Prime Minister of Canada. The Prime Minister is Jean Chrétien. Poutine is some weird-ass potato dish they like in Montreal. Bush didn't know the difference. He says he's gonna fix our schools, make our education better. And his wife Laura, who has one hell of an evil pair of eyes if you look at them closely, she said that her do-gooder project as First Lady was going to be education and literacy, perhaps because of what snores on the other side of the bed. This is Bush on education.
Rarely is a question asked, is our children learning? I will have a foreign-handed foreign policy. I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully.
Speaking of policy and peace, here's his knowledge of the Middle East.
It is clear, our nation is reliant upon big foreign oil. More and more of our imports come from overseas.
The California energy crisis, which turned out to be manufactured in large part by Enron, turning off the gas to drive up the price, and these utility companies demanding and getting tens of billions of dollars of bailouts from our corporate Democrat governor, Gray Davis, and a time when they had $60 billion in assets in other companies in other parts of the country. Real big scam. I mean, you're going to give that many billions of dollars out for utilities. Why don't you just give it to the people to put solar panels on their roofs for free? She, while meeting with Enron, said that the solution was more nuclear power, more coal mining, and that energy conservation was an antiquated 70s idea. Bush said this.
The California crunch really is a result of not enough power generating plants. And then, not enough to power the power of generating plants. Natural gas is hemispheric. I like to call it hemispheric because it is a product that we can find in our neighborhoods.
Hey, if Cheney and Gale, Norton, and Bush have their way to get rid of all the environmental laws, there will be gas leaks in everybody's neighborhoods. The sewers can blow up and kill people like Guadalajara, who knows? Maybe they're prophets. I think this is an abortion quote, I'm not sure.
It is important for us to explain to our nation that life is important. It's not only life of babies, but it's life of children living in, the dark dungeons of the internet.
Just last March, what does he say?
I'm going to extend child care even to those who don't have children. Families is where our nation finds hope, where wings take dream. And at that point, Bush's handlers and spinmeisters had to jump in. Hey, don't you go calling our candidate stupid, even though one of the advisors he's been relying on for war strategy is Dan Quayle. Part of the Pentagon Advisory Council along with Newt Gingrich and chaired by this guy Richard Pearl, all three of them chicken hawks who didn't go to Vietnam too. Anyway, he's not stupid. You're picking on the disabled. He's dyslexic. And I mean no ill will towards anybody who suffers from dyslexia. I've had two in my extended family and they've been through hell because of it. But should we allow somebody who may see things backwards to have their hands on the buttons of weapons of mass destruction? Hey, Gummy, hey, I'm gonna get. Come here, man. Look what I found according to your office. Look at all these buttons. Let's see what they do.
You just launched nuclear missiles in China, sir.
There, we have business over there. I'll call him back.
You just push the button that says you can't call them back, sir.
Well, I have to watch some baseball. I mean, there needs to be a wholesale effort against racial profiling, which is illiterate children.
He said that on live national television during the debates with Gore, where he also said,
You're talking about Social Security like it's some kind of federal program.
it is a federal program. Did they call him on it? No. Instead, this is classic USA Today. Guess how they covered the first debate? Gore appeared better informed on the issues, but Bush appeared more likable. Therefore, he won. That was how they covered the debates, which of course really weren't debates at all because they were mostly agreeing with each other on everything.
I've executed more people than any government in history. Don't mess with Texas.
Why, yes, I think executions are a great idea. Let's kill some criminals, won't we?
We're cracking down on that welfare cheats. Don't mess with Texas.
Why, I'm the one who got Clinton to sign Newt Gingrich's welfare bill and throw hundreds of thousands of people in the street. Ain't I wonderful? This went on and on and on. Just a straw man show, basically. A puppet show, because the third main candidate, Ralph Nader, was locked out of the debates completely. To the point that when he went over 5% in pre-election opinion polls, which got Ross Perot into the 92 debates with Bush's daddy and Clinton and all, and I guess Perot served his purpose. He showed that there was a flying saucer crash at Roswell and the alien walks amongst us.
the barrier to 15%. And the Democrats and Republicans are saying, oh no, it's not our fault, we don't make the rules, the Debate Commission makes the rules. Debate Commission is a corporation owned by the Democratic and Republican parties. And so they go to the Debate Commission and those people say, oh, it's not our fault, it's our sponsors who make the rules. AT&T, Yahoo.com, Budweiser Beer, quote, we can't go against the wishes of our sponsors. Maybe the only honest thing a Republican flunky said during that whole election. We can't go against the wishes of our sponsors. So, they hold the first debate in Boston. A patriotic American who got a ticket to sit in the audience by lottery gives his ticket to Ralph Nader. Every other person, ticket holder, admitted into the hall. Ralph Nader stopped by police and threatened with arrest. So then he goes and gets a Fox News press pass. All the Fox reporters and the crew were allowed in. Again, Ralph Nader stopped by the cop and threatened with arrest. This is what democracy really looks like, or is allowed to look like, anyway. And if I were him, I would have got myself arrested at that point. That would, not even the USA Today could ignore that on the front page, but instead, I realize it's not his style, but a little Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King action right about then would have gone a long way. But so instead, what do we get in the White House but, will the highways on the internet become more few? I know how hard it is for you to put food on your family. I haven't had this much fun with creative mutilation of the English language since my sophomore year in high school, when I had this geometry teacher who, his parents were from Norway, but he was from Minnesota, and had the same accent as all the characters in the Fargo movie. And he had baggy Charlie Chaplin pants in the bell-bottom 70s, and a flannel hunting shirt with white shirt with a little black skinny tie underneath, and a disproportionately small turbany head with wavy widow's peak hair on top. Started out as a seemingly dull math class for the first few weeks. Then, now, we're talking about the angle CAB. Excuse me, B. Angle A-dwee. Boy, am I having a time today. And then it grew, and grew, and grew. And luckily, me and a friend in an earlier class period started writing his quotes down. And by the end of the year, the notebook was about 1.5 inches thick with hundreds of them. Things like, well, congruent triangles had all kinds of interpretations. We working with Klangagi tubers. No! Congruent triangulars, or congruent triangulars, or congruent, where was there? Excuse me, oh yes, triangulars, no, triangulars. Oh no, triangulars. Oh, I can't even try. Failing grade one day turned into, we got the big. I remember these clocks, yeah, cards. But all I got was a flailing groove. Oh, flabby grab. Nibble, quiver bean, failing grunt. Great, grade. Lassie, bottomless Negro. And then the Freudian slips about food, sex, and Watergate began. Do fluorescent lights save energy? Well, it depends like on the boobs, or bloods, or bulbs that you use. Wimpy hamburglers, yeah. See, pimple, you eat less in breakfast. So floundering is sear, laxative, orange porky dog. Blurb, Big Mom, no! And then finally, one day, he came class, Uber diampus blabby. Not one word of English left from the whole sentence. Finally, a year and a half ago, I got to ask an audience in Oslo, is this really Norwegian? No. Nor is asking the class, poofy snibble abby Norwegian either. Nor is breaking out into poems or songs in the middle of problems either. Rubber gloves, sauteed overnight over fire. Rubber gloves, sauteed over open fire. Why do? Can't. Shouldn't I eat it? Extends X. We got another quadratic. So we all equal 32.
What I'm against is quotas. I'm against hard quotas. Quotas, they basically delineate how, based upon whatever. However they delineate quotas, I think vulcanize society. So I don't know how that fits into what everybody else is saying. They're relative positions, but that's my position. It's clearly a budget. It's got a lot of numbers in it. There's not going to be a press conference today. Not in English, not in French, not in Mexican. Africa is a nation that suffers from incredible disease.
Then he goes, a little bit after September 11th, he goes over to England. And he's in yet another photo op with little school children, and even there they can't control him. The little kid asks, what's the White House like?
It is white.
He meets the child prodigy singer Charlotte Church.
So, what state is Wales in?
What state is Wales in? I said, no, it's a separate country next to England. And he went,
Oh, okay.
somehow this guy got buttered and squirted through Yale and Harvard. Not easy places to get into, let alone graduate from. I don't get it. I guess he's just from a good family with a nasty reputation or whatever. But then they even brought him back to do the commencement address at Yale for the graduating class of 2001. What was his advice to them?
And to the C students, I say, you too can be President of the United States.
This is who's leading us to war, folks. Oh, these are funny. And we're thinking on September 11th, wow, wouldn't it be wild if Nader did get elected and the Greens had to deal with this problem? God, at least there's somebody there with some experience. And then I had to think, no, don't believe the hype. With all their experience, look at the messes they use to get us into with it. You know, I know we're supposed to salute the president and follow him off to war, but I have no confidence in Bush or his people to show any long-term wisdom or do the right thing in this situation. I can't shake this vision of him that I've had that keeps, he haunts me. He's even kept me awake at night, of him running around loose in the war room or loose on the grounds of Camp David with his t-shirt pulled over his head like Beavis and Cartoon. She picks him up by the scuff of the neck. Sit down, George. We have wars to plan. We have people to kill. We have countries to annihilate.
Yeah, can we watch some baseball? Got any pretzels?
He's more like the national mascot than the real president. Cheney is the president running the country. Bush is like Reagan. He's just kind of a little national cheerleader or something. I mean, we would have better luck calming things down in the Middle East if he sent Richard Simmons to meet with Yasser Arafat or whatever. Even his own father gave him a no confidence vote on September 11th when they got him on the TV. Is your son prepared for the task ahead? And Bush the elder smiled, that clenched teeth reptilian grin of his.
Now, I'm not sure anyone is truly prepared for something like this. He has a great team around him.
Who has a great team around him? It's the team that worries me. Dick the Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense during Gulf War #1, he ordered then General Colin Powell to draw up plans to nuke Baghdad. And Powell himself, as a young officer, helped cover up the My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War, the worst documented atrocity committed by American soldiers against Vietnamese civilians. National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice has a Chevron oil tanker named after her. Been on their board for years. Sure, she lives up to the billing with her academic powerhouse credentials and her intricate theories of jousting with the old Soviet evil empire, but seems to need reminding it doesn't exist anymore. John Ashcroft, oh my God, no pun intended, hardcore Bible-thumping fundamentalist Christian supremacist and not so closeted white supremacist who he has prayer meetings every day before work. He covered himself, anointed himself in cooking oil before taking the oath of office. He's done that every time he's taken an oath of office. And he's written his own patriotic anthem now, too, that he serenaded CNN with one day. Let the eagle soar. Now he's ordering it translated into Spanish and makes people sing it with him at the Justice Department. He is such an asshole that voters in the state of Missouri elected a dead guy to the Senate in the 2000 election just to get rid of him! He is so obsessed with other people's bodies and skin and nudity. It's almost like the Taliban. He even spent taxpayers' money putting a huge blue velvet curtain around a statue at Justice Department headquarters that's been there for generations because the statue of the woman had one bare metal titty showing. You never know what that could lead to. I mean, as one person put it, now reporters at press conferences have to concentrate on the boob at the microphone instead. Not long ago, PBS ran an anti-porn documentary very heavily in the Ashcroft camp, saying that he was ready to unleash a federal blitz against the adult entertainment industry as if you can put the toothpaste back in the tube now. You know, not everybody's going to cover themselves with cooking oil or take up serpents for you, John. Sorry. I'd love to watch him waving rattlesnakes, you know, snake handler taking up serpents covered in cooking oil. Let the eagle soar! Push! Anyway, he's called ballroom dancing a sexy sin. And apparently he was even suspicious of calico cats as being an instrument of the devil. And his PBS documentary said that, yeah, he's just about ready to unleash a federal blitz and all these raids against adult video people and all, and then September 11th derailed it and he had to turn his attention elsewhere, but he'll be back, they say. Is this what Bush meant by faith-based initiatives? Remember that faith-based initiatives where we're going to cut people's welfare and cut homeless shelter money even worse, and then give the money to churches in hopes that they will help the homeless and help poor people? That smells for a number of reasons. Imagine if the money was given to Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell or something. They would spend it on themselves. Or what happens if it gets as cold as it does here? It's winter, you're homeless, you're freezing to death, you're starving, you can smell the soup on the other side of the door, there's an open bed. Not unless you pray to our God again and again and again, otherwise you can freeze. A friend of mine, when we were teenagers, went into rehab for alcoholism, and they kept taking him to the church across the street in a faith-based initiative, and sure enough, he came out a born-again Christian, got rid of all his records, and none of us has ever heard from him again. What if this whole war is a faith-based initiative? Not only do we have our enemy, violent Islamic fundamentalists, but killing in our name are violent fundamentalist Christians. What happens if that empty space between the ears of King George gets filled with, hey, you want Jesus to come back? You want to share some pretzels with him? You better get Armageddon going. We need that rapture. He ain't ever going to come back. And just think, George, if you push those buttons and blow up the world for the rapture, you'll get to be commissioner of baseball in heaven. Both Bushes and Ashcrack have called for loosening the strings with the remaining laws around our intelligence community and saying that we should allow the CIA and the FBI and the rest to get back into bed with who they call unsavory characters. Bring back the good old days when we wanted to assassinate some other country's leader, pull a coup, or sell some drugs. Just get into bed with the mafia. Get into bed with the drug lords. Well, in a way, the unsavory characters are here. They're called the Bush administration. Anybody who knows their Contragate trivia recognizes an awful lot of familiar names in increasingly high positions. John Negroponte was ambassador to Honduras during the Contra War, that war that estimated to kill about 30,000 Nicaraguans at least, mostly civilians, all the drug running, guns for hostages, crack epidemic in South Central, the rest. Doesn't that sound like somebody you might want to kidnap and put in a cage in Guantanamo Bay as a terrorist? No, we made him ambassador to the United Nations. And look at all the other trouble we've gotten ourselves into through our associations with unsavory characters. In 1953, the CIA thought it would be a real cool idea to overthrow the democratically elected government of Iran and Mohammad Mossadegh and replace him with the Shah, who was deeply despised by his own people. In return for being our policeman in the Middle East, we gave the Shah all kinds of arms. We sold him about 600 plus fighter planes, 20,000 missiles, all kinds of artillery, torture devices for the secret police that we helped set up and train. Sure enough, the Shah used it on his own people instead, literally killing off all moderate and non-religious opposition to his rule. So finally, when people in Iran were so fed up with the Shah, they overthrew him anyway. They had nobody to turn to for leadership but violent Islamic fundamentalists led by Ayatollah Khomeini. And then what happens? Hostage crisis and violent Islamic fundamentalist uprisings catching fire all over that part of the world and beyond. To the point where we were afraid that the Saudi royal family, our oil sheik friends, were going to go down next. So we figured, well, we don't have the Shah anymore to help us colonize the area. I guess we need a new policeman. Let's cozy up to this other violent dictator. Howdy do, Saddam Hussein. We'd like to give you some weapons, and more weapons, and more weapons, and more weapons, so you'll use them in an 8-year war with Iran that kills practically 1 million people, uses up all those weapons we gave the Shah. Then look what happened. Other unsavory characters we couldn't resist getting into bed with include the Mujahideen guerrillas in Afghanistan, who were not formed in response to the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, but according to Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, back in the day, he bragged in an interview in France, it doesn't seem to be quoted much over here, How cool he thought it was that we started recruiting, arming, and training the Mujahideen 6 months before the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, hoping to draw them into a huge no-win war. The Afghan people be damned, and of course the religious views of the Mujahideen and their views towards us be damned. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Hey, their dope is pretty good. On September 29th of last year, the Guardian in Britain had this to say about the Afghan-Soviet war, quote, "In 1979, after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the CIA and Pakistan's ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, considered the most effective spook organization in that part of the world, launched the largest covert operation in the history of the CIA. Their purpose was to harness the energy of Afghan resistance to the Soviets and expand it into a holy war, an Islamic jihad, a concept that used in this way almost unheard of since the 10th century apparently, which would turn the Muslim countries within the Soviet Union, the Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, etc., Chechnya of course, against the communist regime and eventually destabilize it. When it began, it was meant to be the Soviet Union's Vietnam. It turned out to be much more than that. Over the years, through the ISI, the CIA funded and recruited almost 100,000 radical mujahideen from 40 Islamic countries as soldiers for America's proxy war. The rank and file of the mujahideen were unaware that their jihad was actually being fought on behalf of Uncle Sam. The irony is that America was equally unaware it was financing a future war against itself. In 1989, after being bloodied by 10 years of relentless conflict, the Russians withdrew, leaving behind a civilization reduced to rubble. Civil war in Afghanistan raged on. The jihad spread to Chechnya, Kosovo, eventually to Kashmir. The CIA continued to pour in money and military equipment, but the overheads had become immense and more money was needed. The Mujahideen ordered farmers to plant opium as a, quote, revolutionary tax. The ISI set up hundreds of heroin laboratories across Afghanistan. Within 2 years of the CIA's arrival, the Pakistan-Afghanistan borderland had become the biggest producer of heroin in the world and the single biggest source of the heroin on American streets. The annual profits, said to be between $100 and $200 billion, were plowed back into training and arming militants, eventually through Saudi channels, reaching a young hothead with a great big trust fund by the name of Osama bin Laden. On that note, maybe we should take a little bit of an intermission. I will see you in a few minutes. Also, one other announcement real quick. Some of you saw this coming. This is my shoe. Anything put in this shoe goes to the Alternative Tentacles Legal Defense Fund to raise the money for the appeal and bring respect back to dead Kennedy so it doesn't become quite such an ugly memory for many of us who like to have a message and all the other things. No obligation. I know a lot of other people need money. Not everybody has money, I realize, so whatever. Anyway, anything put in here, the shoe and I will be very grateful. Thanks a lot.
Denise Nichols still here? I can't cash a check under my stage name. So if you can give me another one made out to Alternative Tentacles Legal Defense Fund, I'll give you this one back, because I never legally changed my name. Probably just as well. I see that on a driver's license and you're a cop. Is it Rocky King time? Great way to slip through customs, too. Anyway, I've also been reminded, as I forgot to mention earlier, another good news source, especially locally. There's a series of these. It's kind of like a chain, but unlike Starbucks, it's a good chain. How many of you know about the Independent Media Center? Started in Seattle as a clearinghouse for everybody shooting their own footage of the protest to make sure people like CNN didn't slant the news, or worse yet, forget that the protests even happened, which of course in Seattle was a little hard after a while, but they did keep going. At one point, however, CNN claimed that police are coming under fire from anarchist radicals. They are behaving in a level-headed fashion. No rubber bullets have been fired. Within minutes, Independent Media Center had footage of rubber bullets being fired into protesters at close range up on the internet all over the world. And CNN had to change their story. That is the value of the Media Center. And you can go to the Independent Media Center at www.indymedia.org and get links to all the other ones, including Seattle, San Francisco, LA, New York, DC, Palestine as an independent media center. The only reporting you'll get from the other side of Sharon's tanks and all. And there is one here. The Twin Cities Independent Media Center. I think they publish a newspaper too, don't you? That's what I thought, yeah. tc.indymedia.org, as they put it, you publish the news. Upload your stories, photos, audio, and video. And in the age of Clear Channel and all, not a moment too soon. So, after the Soviets were driven out of Afghanistan, did we finish the job? We didn't even thank them. We didn't even give them any, we didn't repair their roads, we didn't put their water supply back together, their cities back up, their schools, their hospitals, nothing. Not even, oh, thanks for being such fine corpses and cannon fodder, see you later. We were out of there. We didn't even disarm all these Mujahideen guerrillas who degenerated into warlords using the weapons we gave them to fight each other, with the Afghan people caught in the crossfire. And so this went on for almost another 10 years. It got so bad that at one point when two different factions of the Northern Alliance were trying, I can't believe they call those clowns an alliance, two different factions of the Northern Alliance fighting over Kabul, the capital. By the time they were done, 50,000 people dead, and a third of the city destroyed. This going on all over the place for years on end, the Taliban began to look pretty good. And in the Muslim world, our refusal to help the Afghan people after that war is referred to as the Great Betrayal. They haven't forgotten. And United Nations, yeah, so basically with that in mind, if we think we can go in and occupy Iraq after we've gotten rid of Saddam Hussein, and there's three different factions who are all going to fight there, the Sunnis, the Muslims, Shiite Muslims, and the Kurds in the north, they don't dig each other at all. We think we can go in there and everybody's going to embrace McDonald's and Baywatch and Yankee-style managed democracy. I think we're a little mistaken because people remember the Great Betrayal. And according to the United Nations Drug Control Policy Arm, half the heroin, they issued this last October 2001, half the heroin
then still coming from Afghanistan was coming from the 10% of the country, then still controlled by the Northern Alliance. And now that the Northern Alliance has been given free rein in the rest of the country, they're growing poppies again all over the place. They're shooting the shit out of each other again. Well, we have a few people hunting Al-Qaeda in the hills, and 5,000 troops occupying Kabul to make sure at least Hamid Karzai, the president, can look like a caretaker during daylight hours. But the rest of the time, Afghanistan be damned again. And meanwhile, the Taliban was running the country. We gave them $140 million a year in foreign aid, plus in the spring of 2001, another $43 million bonus for fighting drugs. Is this any way to win a war on terrorism? There's no way we will ever win a war on terrorism. Even if we win, what would be victory? Israel's been fighting a war on terrorism since the moment of their birth. Have they won yet? Britain has been fighting what they call a war on terrorism in Northern Ireland steadily since the late 60s. Have they won yet? Yet Bush and his cowboys think we can take on the whole world with no experience in the field, that we somehow have the God-given right to treat everybody else's country the way the Israelis treat the Palestinians.
The only way to pursue peace is to pursue those who threaten it.
What? What about negotiation? Too many syllables for King George? What about sitting down and listening to what the other side has to say instead of this Condoleezza Rice attitude that we should not be bound down by any illusion of international solidarity, as she puts it? The problem is, Osama bin Laden speaks for a lot more people. Millions more people. And if we're ever going to get to the bottom of this, we can't just demonize these other people. We got to get inside their heads. Feel bin Laden, so to speak. And I saw an interview with him about 3 or 4 years ago. Like a fool, I didn't save it. But I was struck by how he didn't come across as some frothing maniac out to wipe out God, Mom, and apple pie. What he was saying was clearly very well thought out, scary as hell. His points of view on a lot of things were totally repulsive, but, you know, this was very carefully plotted out. You know, why did he turn into this person? What made him join the jihad? The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan that we helped arrange. Consequences like Osama be damned. And he was also set off by the Saudi royal family using the army to fire on and kill protesters in Mecca during the pilgrimage in 1979. But he said what really set him off was our so-called nice, neat little victory in the first Gulf War that was going to make all these problems go away once and for all. He was enraged that the Saudi royal family he hates so much, and like 99.99% of the rest of the country would like to see them deposed. But he said they used holy Arab land, which he defines as the entire territory of Saudi Arabia, to let infidels, theoretically including women soldiers with no veils, whatever, stage bombing raids and military raids to kill fellow Muslims in other countries. And he felt, okay, if these infidel Americans are the problems, as he put it, I want to kill Americans whenever and wherever I can find them. That was what we got out of the Gulf War. And he's not alone in how much people hate their leaders over there. He pointed out that these monarchs were put there by the British after World War I when they divided up what was left of the Ottoman Empire, redrew a lot of borders, created a country called Jordan out of thin air, where there was never a country like that before, and Jordan even has a king now. And he said most of these monarchs weren't even native to the countries that they now rule with an iron fist, although a little research into that proved he was a little off base, that the Saudi royal family goes back hundreds of years, and the Kuwaiti monarchy at least 200. But he was right in that we cemented them in there, the British did, to make sure that the oil always flowed towards us in return for allowing them to rule their countries like Stone Age despots, and we'd give them the guns. So not everybody there is very happy about this. Saudi Arabia, 30% unemployment rate in a country that seems super rich, but in fact it's 5,000 members of the royal family making off with almost every single penny of the oil wealth. Everybody else is mad, and not only is there 30% unemployment, but like most of the Middle East, half the population is under 25, and they ain't got no future, and they're pissed as hell. Egypt, great rumblings like this going on underneath too. You know, what's going to happen to those rumblings? Will the pot boil over if we start bombing the shit out of Iraq and everybody starts taking out their rage and they try to do to the Saudi royal family what the people did to the Shah? That's how much fire we're playing with over there. Does that mean we then have to fight the Saudi people as well? Plus, all those jihad warriors who after the Soviet-Afghan war was over, they were recruited from all those other countries. They went back to their countries with newfound religious jihadi fervor and fighting skills. And lo and behold, violent Islamic fundamentalist uprisings stretching all across. They've got it in Egypt, big one in Algeria that's killed 100,000 people in a civil war over the last 10 years. Stretching all the way across to Indonesia, 2 different violent Islamic fundamentalist uprisings, another one in southern Mindanao and the Philippines, where we've already sent in troops who couldn't even do a hostage rescue right and killed one of the Americans the bandits were holding and all. Then you get to Pakistan, where that dictator must be shitting bricks right now. The dictator Pervez Bashar, he's only been in power 3 years, was put there in a military coup, and there's guns in 2 sides of his head now. One.
You're with us, you're with the terrorists. Don't mess with Texas.
And the other side is on the people. Estimated by the European media to be 15% pro-Taliban, you know, not just Afghan Taliban, but wanting that kind of a government in Pakistan as well, and this is said to enjoy the sympathy of 30% of the armed forces, including many top generals, possibly some of the same ones who put Bashar there and could knock him off too. Bashar sacked the longtime head of the ISI intelligence for being too sympathetic to the fundamentalists. He's got interesting friends. Plus, rogue parts of the ISI and the Pakistani army are helping do all the terrorist acts inside Kashmir, hijacking the Kashmiri people's cause, wanting an independent country, wanting to make it part of Pakistan, so they kill people sympathetic to India. What does the Prime Minister of India do? Musharraf, you either stop this or I'm nuking you with our missiles. But I can't control my army, I can't control these people, so I'm going to have a preemptive war and I'm going to nuke you first. Yeah. That close last spring until the business community and corporations went into India and said, look, you launch a nuclear war instead of trying to stop this, and we're going to pull all our high-tech industry out of India. Then finally it calmed down some, but the Kashmir violence still goes on. Plus, if Bashar gets knocked off and a fundamentalist military dictator takes his place, does that mean we have to turn the war on terrorism, or TWAT for short, expand not just Iraq, not just Afghanistan, but into a country of 140 million people who has the atomic bomb? That's how much fire we're playing with over there. Plus, up above Afghanistan is those former Soviet republics, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, up above them, Kazakhstan, who's supposed to have more oil than Saudi Arabia, if we can ever figure out how to get it out. Violent Islamic fundamentalist uprisings right at a time when we're embracing dictators who are totally out of their minds, who've gotten control of those countries. The dictator of Turkmenistan, even renamed all the days of the week and all the months of the year after himself. But now he's our friend, because he's part of our twat allies and all. There's even a part of China that touches Afghanistan and borders it. Violent Islamic uprising going on there, too. How much more fire are we going to play with, especially if people start rampaging all through the Middle East because they're so pissed off at us and their leaders for allowing this? What's Sharon going to do? Now I finally invade West Bank and drive all Palestinians out. Then what happens? I find myself risking giving Bin Laden exactly what he wanted, a world war between Islam and the West, which Islam sure as hell isn't going to win, but an awful lot of people are going to die, an awful lot of the place is going to get destroyed, our people are going to die, the people who left over, and generations afterwards are going to be dedicating their lives to killing more of us in revenge. I find myself agreeing with Michael Medved, of all people, a right-wing punditoid, when he wrote in the USA Today, of all places, the American people must pursue prevention and protection, not punishment. Prevention, protection, not punishment. Starting, maybe, with not just ending our dependence on foreign oil, but as much as humanly possible, ending our dependence on oil altogether. Why SUVs are a greater threat to national security than Osama bin Laden? Not only do they eat up so much gas and spew out so much crap into the air that it maybe is responsible for as much as 10% of our air pollution now, but all that fuel those flying mobiles gobble up makes us that much more dependent on foreign oil and that much more dependent on keeping everybody in that part of the world repressed so we can run off with their oil to power the yuppie Cadillacs and all. Besides, what good is it going to do to put up a whole wall around ourselves to protect us from terrorists if we put so many holes in the sky we can't go outside anymore? Instead of blowing another $100 billion plus on Star Wars, how about some of that money for getting serious about safer airports and safer airplanes? I went over to Europe and I noticed there a lot of the people checking the carry-on bags and watching the airports were, uniformed federal officers, well-paid and well-trained, specifically in breaking up hijackings. Here, we privatized the whole thing, turned it over to corporations more interested in making money off airport security than protecting passengers. To the point that in San Francisco, the people still running the metal detectors and inspecting the carry-on bags today are the lowest paid people in the whole airport. Turnover of those jobs, 115 to 140% a year. Most of them barely know how to speak English. And when Congress put through a law to make a federal airport security force for this country, which I think just came online at the airport here a day or two ago, guess who tried to block it? Bush and the House Republicans, on the grounds that it took profits away from rent-a-car companies. That's how serious the Bush mob really is about protecting us from future terrorist attacks. We could be taking some lessons from El Al Airlines in Israel, who, well, granted, it takes a while to get on one of their flights, but at least it flies. And every single piece of checked baggage is put through what I guess is a decompression chamber to simulate high altitude. So if there's a high altitude triggered bomb, it goes off on the ground and nobody gets hurt.
Then they protect their pilots with not one but 2 bulletproof doors, reinforce the cabin of the plane so that if somebody does get on board and tries to write a new chapter of The Last Temptation of Reed and set their shoe on fire, it won't necessarily down the aircraft. It all depends on what we're willing to pay for. And all, as a plainclothes commando on every flight, trained specifically in how to break up hijackings. We have an air marshal here and there, but you know, I don't mind having him on there. Somebody said, "Oh, Joe, you're betraying the precious punk scene. You're calling for cops at the airports and cops on the airplanes. That's not anarchy." I would rather have a trained air marshal on every flight than die. Thank you very much. And that's a hell of a lot better solution than just giving guns to pilots. We're talking about having them available to flight attendants too. I mean, then what happens?
Would you like a snack? Bang! Oh dear. We had the snack, we had the gun disguised as pretzel bags because fool the terrorists. I didn't know.
Ashcraft says we have to have all these new soldiers to guard our nuclear plants from in case the big bad wolf comes to try and attack them next. That's not going to be a problem if we shut them down. And we wouldn't have to burn up so much jet fuel and spend so much time waiting in line at the airport and have to get there an hour early instead of sleeping and all these other things if we were as serious as Europe and Japan and the rest of the world are about their rail systems, high-speed rail. Get on the train, and in an hour or less, you're in Chicago. 3 or 4 hours, you're in San Francisco. It can be done. And think of the benefits. You can walk around instead of sitting there strapped in the whole time. And there will be actual scenery to look at. And even if it blows by at warp speed, you've seen enough MTV commercials, that ain't gonna bother you now, is it? Get up and get drunk at the bar. Sure, you can hijack a train too, but you can't fly it into buildings and kill thousands of people. Besides, trains are cool. And get this, in the 2000 election in Florida, voters passed a ballot initiative to build a high-speed rail system. Jeb Bush won't let any of the money loose, but that country with all those boneheads, and even they knew enough to pass that. So maybe you should put one on the ballot here, too. And as unreasonable as Osama bin Laden is, 2 of his 3 key demands are reasonable. Number 1, pull the American troops out of Saudi Arabia. There's only 6,000 of them there anyway. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudis, not one Afghan or Iraqi. If it means that much to the people there that they would quit killing us if we quit occupying their country, isn't that a small price to pay? Number 2. Isn't it time to do the right thing and end the sanctions against Iran? Look how well they've worked. Even Colin Powell admits they're a failure, and instead of calling it an atrocity, he calls them a PR problem. But look at it, Saddam is still sitting pretty while it's his people who are dying off by the thousands of starvation and dying of treatable diseases like diarrhea and stuff because we won't let any medicine into the country. We won't let in any equipment to fix the water purifying equipment and whatnot. We won't allow that. And granted, we would
we put his oil-producing stuff back together. We're buying over 2/3 of the oil Iraq exports now. And guess who put all the oil infrastructure back together? $28 billion contract to Halliburton Construction, then run by Dick Cheney. Now, death toll from the starvation and the Gulf War and everything else in Iraq, conservative estimates, 200,000. Not so conservative estimates, between 1 and 2 million Iraqis, almost all of them civilians, maybe women, mainly women and children. That is a textbook definition of genocide. Even if it's only 200,000, the blood is on our hands, and everybody in the Middle East knows that and hates our fucking guts for it. So when Bush says, "Oh, I don't understand why people hate us. I know we're good. They hate us because of our freedom." Wrong. They hate us because we won't let them have their freedom. Demand number 3 is not so reasonable. Total destruction of the state of Israel. But we could sure as hell be doing a little more to rein in Sharon and his thugs and get them to rejoin the human race. All we'd have to do would be to cut off the ambassador, recall the ambassador and cut off the military aid, and Sharon would wise up in 10 minutes. Plus, according to Professor Henry Thompson of Auburn University, all Israel would have to do to replenish the military aid would be to raise their own income taxes 5%. And we could also be going into Afghanistan and the borderland up with Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, etc. There's all these leftover weapons from the Soviet-Afghan War, leftover weapons from the Cold War stretching all the way across into Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, where we're like Kazakhstan. There's rumored to be nuclear leftovers just sitting around. The people in these places are starving. We didn't do jack shit for them after we won the Cold War either. Sooner or later, they're going to get desperate enough to sell those weapons off to anybody who will give them something to eat. It's already going on. There's a flea market that one of the British reporters went to in Dar Adam Khel, a little town near Peshawar, the big Pakistani city that's right near the Afghan border. And it was like a flea market. Instead of looking for cool records or weird clothes or a lamp or something, ooh, look at all those M16s. I'll take 500. Kalashnikovs? Great, he's got them today. Ooh, how about some bombs? Awesome. Grenades? Great. Rocket launchers, surface-to-air missiles? We gave the Mujahideen 200 of them. They haven't been found yet. Oh, we'll take some of those too. We should go to all those places, spend the Star Wars money buying up and destroying those weapons on site. So nobody else can get a hold of them. And plus, in Afghanistan, we damn well better finish the job this time. Bush and Rumsfeld have already announced that our job is done. We're not here to build nations, we're here to destroy them. We did drop 30,000 yellow plastic bags of food unfamiliar to the local tastes, one for one day's rations in one part of the country. Some people knew they'd have to run across unexploded landmines to get the food, so they never did. That does not solve the problem. The UN's estimate that 7 million people in that country are on the brink of starvation. That's not going to cut it this time. Otherwise, we get another Taliban and another and another. We should have learned by now. After World War I, we did nothing for the German people, just rubbed them in the rubble and the humiliation and ruins of their own country. And it got so bad there, at one point, it took a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread. About a decade and a half of that, they were pretty desperate. They were pretty angry, and they all but democratically elected Hitler to power. Then what happened? Well, after that, we were a little smarter, and we had the Marshall Plan to rebuild rebuild Germany, put the infrastructure of Western Europe back together, did the same, stayed in Japan, put it back together, and introduced democracy into a country that had never had it before. What do you know? No more Hitlers. So why no Marshall Plan for the former Soviet Union? It's not too late. Now we've abandoned them to mob rule, and sooner or later somebody with Hitler-like tendencies who can get things done, they're going to flock to that if it looks real, because nothing else has worked over there, in large part because we refuse to help them. That would be, again, a way better investment and probably cheaper than Star Wars. And, as Michael Moore put it, will we ever get to the point that we realize we will be more secure when the rest of the world isn't living in poverty so we can have nice running shoes? What do we do instead? Look at the hype right after September 11th. Fight back, America! Show they'll never let us down! Do your patriotic duty! Go shopping! Isn't it our appetite for shopping and getting endless amounts of stuff so cheap it has to be made by slaves overseas, and that's the inequality that comes with that, that's creating a lot of the animosity and terrorism in the first place? We're doing it above ground, too. Globalization plays a big role as well. For example, a lot of the Pakistan jihad warriors who crossed into Afghanistan to fight against us recently were all trained in these religious schools that have multiplied all over the country there and in other countries called madrasas. They're financed and run by our friends, the Saudi royal family. And what they do is they'll take in kids who can't afford to go to school or maybe don't even have a place to live or enough to eat. They'll feed you, they'll shelter you, and then K through 12 or whatever, do you get math, science, history, literature? No. You get the gospel according to the Quran over and over and over again through the narrow interpretation of the extremist Wahhabi Muslim sect. They've only run two countries. They have the Taliban and the Saudi government, or the two Wahhabi governments. We haven't get it as bad in Saudi Arabia as they did in Afghanistan, almost. Anyway, the people graduate at the other end knowing very little about the world except that they can hardly wait to get into jihad and kill Americans. And why have the madrasas multiplied faster than Starbucks all over Pakistan? Because the Pakistani school system is largely extinct because they don't have any money for education anymore, so they just don't put any money into it. Instead, they spend it on, of course, the nuclear program to fuck with India, and get this, 40% of Pakistan's annual budget goes to paying off debts to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, when it could be going for schools and health and everything else. So with that in mind, fighting against the forces of globalization, the WTO, the World Bank, international monetary fraud, is not terrorism, it is fighting terrorism, because those institutions, not only do they terrorize us, but they terrorize people over there even worse, and when the people fight back, they don't take it out on the corporations, they take it out on us. But back-breaking poverty is a prime recruiting ground for radical movements for change, and violent, strong-armed put-downs of radical movements for change creates the desperation and rage that creates terrorists. I agree we got to defend ourselves. This is an enemy that won't negotiate. They want us all dead. But again, defense, not offense, meaning don't let the fight against corporate power fall victim to the war on terrorism. Don't abandon the fight against the death penalty at a time when more and more people are waking up to the fact that it's wrong. Against the drug war, against homelessness, against pollution and all. Don't let all that go by the wayside. Don't believe the hype. We are patriotic citizens too. If we care about the long-term effects of what our country does, and not just short-term ass-kicking to soothe our inner child. Patriotism is defined as love of country, caring about the people in the country, the environment, how it affects other people and the lands they live. Patriotism is not giving blind loyalty and a blank check to George W. Bush. Therefore, it is our patriotic duty to guard the country that deep down inside, I think most of us do love, at least a little bit, guard our country against people who hide behind the flag and God bless America uber alles to use the war on terrorism to terrorize us. Bullying the first neighbor who takes the flag down, that is not patriotic. Brandon Cruz calling me a terrorist because I don't suck up to Bush, that is not patriotic. Censoring Bill Maher and talk show people like Peter Werby and all those college professors, that's not patriotic. Giving more and more money and power to evil, incompetent spy agencies, that's not patriotic. The legislators in Florida, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina who say in order to fight terrorism, everybody should have to pray to their Christian God in school every day, that's not patriotic. The Army of God, who somehow didn't make Ashcroft's terrorist list, even though they sent over 200 envelopes of white powder to abortion clinics and family planning centers, that's not patriotic. And I, for one, refuse to be bullied by all those people that say because of the undeniable tragedy of September 11th, you can't laugh when something's funny anymore. As Osama bin Laden. That is funny. Dick Cheney's security detail leaving a printout of the plans on how they're going to protect him during the Salt Lake City Olympics on the counter of a snowboard store. That is funnier. John Ashcraft and his Taliban-like obsession with nudity. If he goes crazy on the adult industry, how about a million nude march on Washington? 1 million people on the grass of the Capitol Mall all rolling around, doing all those things Ashcroft says he doesn't like, with another 1,000 on his lawn just for good measure. That, my friends, would amuse me. You know that hip-hop group from Oakland? I think they've played here, actually, The Coup? Yeah! They ran into a little bit of a problem on September 11th. They had to stop the presses on their new album because it showed the group members standing below the Trade Center towers as they were blowing up. Oops. Scott Ian of the metal band Anthrax, moaning and groaning on their website about how he felt so bad about the anthrax scare that he wanted to change the name of the band to Basket Full of Puppies. Jerry Falwell, always good for a laugh, especially after he said the Teletubbies were a homosexual conspiracy. He and Pat Robertson agreed with bin Laden on September 11th that the towers went down because God was mad at America. Bush and the pretzel. What else need be said? Except, considering how carefully they packed package him and keep everything secret? Why would they go out and trumpet to the world that he almost choked to death on a pretzel unless something much weirder is what really occurred? How did he really get the scrape on his cheek? Did he and Jenna have an ashtray fight after a drinking binge or something? Did he stand up and black out and hit his head on the table after indulging in some of those youthful indiscretion substances he refuses to talk about? And what about the reports that some of the hijackers, including Muhammad Atta, were seen getting drunk in titty bars in Florida a few nights before the attack? But so far, the runaway winner in the twat comedy sweepstakes is your friends and mine, the Clear Channel Corporation, who people tell me are actively trying to put this venue out of business as I speak, by the way. They're the ones who bought up all these different concert promotion companies and took advantage of Clinton getting together with Gingrich once again. Clinton and Gore and Gingrich and Lott all getting together to ram through the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which lifted the restriction that was in place where one entity or corporation could only own one radio station per market. Now, Clear Channel can own 6 in every market, and they've gobbled up over 10% of the radio stations in the United States, and the SFX Concert Promotion Company, and many more, and a lot of the billboard space. They're really hard to escape now, run by a fundamentalist Christian and an old pal a la Kenny Boy Lay of George Bush's named Tom Hicks out of San Antonio, Texas. Anyway, somebody at Clear Channel took it upon themselves to compile a list of all the songs they thought shouldn't be played anymore because of September 11th. This came out within days. And so now, at least on Clear Channel, if you tuned into their bland, cookie-cutter, dumbed-down radio with all the local programs thrown out the door, you will at least not be terrorized by Obla-Dee Obla-Da by the Beatles. Hit Me With Your Best Shot by Pat Benatar. Dust in the Wind by Kansas. On Broadway by the Drifters. Johnny Angel by Shelley Fabre, maybe the worst song I have ever heard. So at least Clear Channel's doing something right, eh? 3 Elton John songs made the list. One Elton John song and I never wanted to hear his music again. So at least on Clear Channel I will not be terrorized by Benny and the Jets, Daniel, or Rocket Man. Or What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. Or Come On People Now, Smile on Your Brother, Everybody Get Together, Try and Love One Another Right Now. Not on Clear Channel, you know. That might remind people of exploding skyscrapers. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Can't have that either. That sounds like terrorism right there. No. Spirit in the Sky. Can't have that either. Pat Cat Stevens gets the axe for Peace Train. Morning is Broken. That sounds like terrorism to me. Although wouldn't he be interesting to interview right about now about current affairs? For those of you who don't know, the reason he too isn't bleeding the 70s retro cow dry is because he had a religious conversion several years ago and now calls himself Yusuf Islam. And he was asked about Ayatollah Khomeini putting the death warrant on the author Salman Rushdie for writing the book The Satanic Verses. He was asked about that. In his reply, well, let's put it in one of his songs. If someone defames the prophet, he must die. Rock the Casbah's band. All Rage Against the Machine is bad. Imagine by John Lennon is bad. Wipe Out by the Safaris. for some of us. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. Not anymore. Band, 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 band. Wouldn't it be better protecting our homeland and national security and all to channel that energy instead into shortening the war on terrorism and pulling the plug on Iraq before it starts? And now an advertisement for Arise Bookstore and Resource. The latest franchise is right over there where I still have a handful of little alternative tentacle shits. Shits. No, shirts. Over on the wall there. Anyway, shortening the war. I know how lonely it must feel right now, but they said they had a demonstration today over at university and 600 people showed up, which seems small now, but people like Noam Chomsky and Tom Hayden, who was one of the original founders of the SDS and helped spearhead the anti-Vietnam War movement, have said that the protest movement against this war is way further off the ground than the anti-Vietnam War one was at the same time. Yet still, it feels a little bit like 1964 with Gulf of Tonkin rammed through without consulting the people, really. And, those few lonely voices in the wilderness crying out saying, yo, this war is wrong, it's going to be a disaster, we shouldn't go there, bring those troops home. And they were put down and demonized as communists, traitors, which after the Cuban Missile Crisis was a legitimate fear, but they were freaks, pinkos, peaceniks, faggots. But in the long run, against incredible odds, the American people, with the whole military-industrial complex aiming at us with both barrels, the hierarchies of the Democratic and Republican parties aiming at us with both barrels, nevertheless, the American people rose up and we did stop the Vietnam War. We've done it once, we can do it again. And a lot sooner, I'll bet you. Look how quickly we stopped the last Gulf War. That was over in a matter of weeks because I suspect even though all the hype in corporate media, of course, was that, everybody loves George Bush the First. Everybody just loves the war. We think it's a great idea. Yellow ribbons around the car antennas, even around the occasional old oak tree to support our troops and all. But even up in Bush world, they knew that was horseshit. Because the protests were getting so big and so fierce, so fast. Not even just in big cities like this one, but small town USA, they happened almost immediately. And they happened in Europe, they even happened in the Middle East. There were mass protests in countries where it's illegal, like Syria and Egypt and Algeria. Everybody was up in arms. Plus, and Schwarzkopf was all ready to go cross the border from Kuwait into Iraq and lay waste to that country. He wanted to do a General Sherman job on Basra and Baghdad, kill everybody there just in case one of them is Saddam. But Bush, who doesn't have much respect for human life, nor does his son, called him back, pulled the plug on the war. Protests were a big factor, plus he had been forced to make a promise to the UN that he wouldn't go past that border and had to promise the Allies he wouldn't go past that border. And I'm sure John Major in Britain wouldn't have given a damn if he'd crossed over and broke his promise. Helmut Kohl, who was Chancellor of Germany at the time, he wouldn't have cared. They knew their people did care because the protests were so big over there, too. That's why it's important that if you know people overseas, email them, call them, write them, however you like to communicate with them, and urge them, I think it's a cigarette smoke, sorry, anyway, urge them to put the pressure on their leaders and their governments not to knuckle under and suck Bush's butthole on this one. How solid even is the British support when 3 weeks ago 500,000 people marched in London against the war, followed a week later by 1.5 million marching in Italy? You know, this is one of our best hopes to prevent this possible World War III incorporated that Bush and his cowboys have in mind. And to get across to people here that not only is the war wrong, but needs to be actively opposed, couple things. Number one, and this is all cases, don't hate the media, become the media. All the underground feeds, communicating on the net, and everything, that is not enough in this case. We got to go one-on-one to people we know at home, at school, work, family, and when they start saying, oh, I guess we need to go to war, hey, I'm going to kick Saddam's ass, don't tune them out as unreachable. Talk to them. Talk to them in this way. Number one, forgive the flags. I know how scary they seem right now. It has a real fascist vibe to it. But some of the people are putting up those flags and flying them not because they love W, but because it's out of sympathy for the victims of September 11th and their families. Let them have the flags. We do have freedom of speech in this country. But the way to get through, even to flag people that the war is wrong and being totally mismanaged for their own cynical purposes by the Bush mob, is just to point out it is piss poor military strategy. The goal is to protect us and the rest of the world from terrorists, right? Wasn't that the goal of the twat? Well, how are we going to accomplish that when every time we blow people to smithereens in Afghanistan and especially in Iraq, all we're doing is planting the seeds for more bin Ladens, more Al-Qaedas, more suicide bombers, thus making our own country and our own lives less and less and less safe. That is poor military strategy. And even my girlfriend's stepmother, who's so rah-rah right-wing Republican, she's devoted a wing of the trophy home she lives in to a Republican museum open to the public with all this Reagan memorabilia and all these little gewgaws of the first Bush regime and every different American flag ever made throughout history. Yeah, when my girlfriend pointed out to her, wait a minute, this is piss poor military strategy and we're going to have even worse problems if we do this, she stopped, of all people, and said, you know, that's a good point. That's how you get through to people that the war needs to be stopped. As they say in showbiz, let's roll. Because now of all times is not the time to play cowboy, George. And it also may seem a little lonely at times to be actively fighting against corporate power. The slow but sure coup going on in this country, pushing aside our democracy and our Constitution in favor of direct rule by corporations. Well, we're not as alone as we think we are on this one. A very conservative weekly publication available on any newsstand began getting some very interesting results of the people they polled. Starting a few years ago, and they published them too, starting with over half the people they polled said the protesters in Seattle had a point. Then in 2000, right before the election, they came back with another one. 72% of the people they polled said business has too much power and that corporations are invading too far into people's private lives. And that huge corporate campaign contributions cause corruption and undermine democracy. And imagine and underpaid, especially in contrast to those CEOs who now make nearly 500 times their average employee's wage, by far the biggest disparity in the industrialized world. And people increasingly feel threatened by the products and services sold by corporations. And even these people said, corporations, as a result, should get out of politics. Corporations need to start sharing the wealth. And guess who said this? Business Week. In a cover story titled "Too Much Corporate Power?", to which they answered an emphatic yes. Boy, did Ralph Nader have fun with this on the campaign trail. This puts Business Week to the left of the Democratic Party. Who can argue with that? I mean, how fed up are people you'd never expect to be on our side with corporate-managed fake democracy run by Republicans when people were so disgusted in this state they made a professional wrestler governor? That's the stuff right there. I mean, obviously he stopped being fun real quick after he got into office. And, you know, right-wing libertarians never are very much fun. But anyway, I also realize that not everybody is going to go on the 26th. Not everybody can or wants to do these things. But don't let the more radical than thou ever convince you that just because you're not doing exactly what they're doing or to the same degree, that you're useless. Doing something is better than doing nothing. Every time. And even Michael Moore kind of stops and just ends his talks with, okay, you gotta go do something. What? Here's some ideas. And they're so easy, you don't have to go to meetings or whatever to do this. You can start doing it right now as an individual. Should you decide you want to do this, just make a vow to yourself, I'm not cooperating with the corporate agenda anymore. They can't have me. Starting with, don't give them your money. Give them your account. Give them the max. Don't give them your money. No more shopping at chain stores. No more money to chain restaurants. No more money to box stores like Walmart and Home Depot and Kmart and the rest of them. No more Mall of America either. As much as humanly possible, even from independent stores, don't buy products manufactured and distributed by multinational corporate predators. Put the money back into places that'll keep the money into the community instead. Think of the benefits. You support your independent music store, there's more likely to be good music in the store. Interesting music, diverse music, local music, maybe even your music. You're not going to get that at the Virgin Megastore or Cocksucker or whatever. You gotta go to the independents. You support the independent bookstore instead of Borders and Buds and Newmile. The clerk may even know how to read. And like literature, support the independent markets and grocery stores and not the big corporation supermarkets. You're more likely to get locally grown food, organic food, hopefully, and less likely to be fed genetically modified, or should I say genetically mutilated Frankenfood, into your cornflakes, into the grocery bag, and into your body without them even telling you what's inside the box. And as hard as it is to find meaningful work long-term that'll actually pay the bills so you don't wind up my age living in rat holes with roommates you can't stand, try not to work for them. But if you must work for them, just remember that the computer age has opened up a whole new frontier of sabotage on the job. But if you do decide to take this on and turn other people onto it, which is not real hard to do, you know, help spread the good disease, don't come across as a born-again fundamentalist radical preacher. Fundamentalist radicals annoy me as much as fundamentalist religious people do for the same reason. So black and white. You either agree with me 100% on everything or you're against me. I've known so many people who start out more punk than thou, more radical than thou, more anarchist than thou, more squat than thou, more vegan than thou for 6 months. 2 years, then something sets in where they're not only making other people miserable and turning them off to perfectly good ideas in the process, but they're making themselves miserable. But because the black and white blinders are on, no middle ground, no color allowed, it's like, well, if I don't do everything exactly this way, I'm going to be selling out. But I'm so sick of this, I'm selling out all the way. Free pass! See you later, bye! Doesn't have to be that way. The guitarist, and last one anyway, of one of the pioneering anarchist hardcore bands in Northern California, after they broke up, he supposedly went back to LA, bought a BMW, got a computer job, and nobody I know has ever heard a word from him since. It doesn't have to be this way. You know, you pick a moral code, ethical code, and a lifestyle you can actually live with and live up to long term. It's way more likely to stick with you. I mean, the more radical than thou may put you down for this, but if you go only this far on the radical meter instead of this far, you're less likely to have the mousetrap effect go boing! And you've turned into the exact sort of yuppie SUV parasite you hated in the first place. Doesn't have to happen to you. And again, don't hate the media, become the media. And part of that is, you know, people say, oh, we're welfare cheats. You know, no, it's corporate welfare cheats. You know, that even if it doesn't work right away on any of this stuff, you know the people, you know what's important to them. Don't dictate, communicate. And they may go to sleep thinking you're out of your mind and eventually wake up and decide maybe that was the right thing after all. You know, it doesn't work every time, but Michael Moore's really big on this too, saying, you know, you self-styled progressives got to get off your high horse and go out and reach out to the community and mix with the people a little more. Go bowling. Go line dancing. Hi, I'm Boot Scootin' to overthrow George Bush and stop the clock war. Can I talk to you for a minute? I don't know that that's the best use of my time, but I see what he's getting at. And even if you do wind up in a really financially successful career track, doctor, lawyer, contractor, dentist, website genius, whatever, one way of giving back to the community is giving back to the community. Providing the services you make so much money from to people who can't afford it for free every once in a while. Represented me in the Frankenchrist obscenity case that the other guys didn't help with at all, I might add. He did it for no fee because he felt he wanted to give something back to his profession, as he put it, and he was sick of people like Tipper Gore and Ed Meese picking on the Constitution. Oh, I have to show you this, too. This is my souvenir from the Democratic Convention. I actually got in on the last day and witnessed these 5,000 Truman Show type plastic, straight, almost comatose people erupt all of a sudden like it's Ozfest or the Nuremberg rallies. Yay! Yay! All waving pre-provided signs saying, Tipper rocks! Tipper rocks! kind of contempt for the intelligence and memory of the American people on the part of the Democratic Party is this. No, my friends, Tipper doesn't rock. And neither does the Democratic Party. Issue with Wellstone, because granted he's probably a better senator than Norm Coleman could possibly be. But don't listen to anybody who says that just because somebody's running under a third party or voting for a third party, you spoilers. The spoilers are people like Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Gray Davis, Dianne Feinstein, who sold every decent principle the Democratic Party ever stood for down the river to corporations. They are the spoilers. Ralph Nader and the Green Party did not cost Gore the election. Gore cost Gore the election. Not only because he was so bitchy about 3 little counties in southern Florida and did nothing for the tens of thousands of African Americans not allowed to vote in the northern part. Read a book called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy by Greg Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T, if you want to find out more about that one. But the reason so many of us went to Nader and have gone green instead of trying to reform the Democrats from within is because I don't care who the opponent is, I am not going to vote for anyone who is pro-death penalty, pro-drug war, pro-Star Wars, which Gore was too, pro-NAFTA and globalization. Gore wasn't even a good environmentalist. He went to Kyoto in 1998 to try and get rid of that treaty right then and there. As Michael Moore puts it, Al Gore wrote a great book on the environment. Perhaps he should read it sometime. You know, this is interesting to watch with district attorney races locally, too. You ought to try and hold them to a pledge. The district attorney in San Francisco has a policy of never charging anybody with a crime that could get them the death penalty. You know, the really badass murderers are still going to go to jail for life, but he will not enforce the death penalty. That is a pledge that every single candidate for DA should be held to, or they don't get our vote. Period. And giving something back to the community falls under the greater umbrella of not forgetting where you came from, long term. Look at all the old activist hippies who turned into yuppies. Look at the ex-members of my old band. My God. You know, the best way to avoid that happening to you is simply not to let it happen to you. I mean, sometimes people tip over when they buy property and or have kids. And all of a sudden there's something so precious they have to protect it from them. Now my money must go into the stock market instead of them. Now I must guard my children from hanging out with them. Now I must have the big armored car SUV to drive my children to and from school and to soccer and the psychiatrist so that they won't be touched by them. And if somebody else gets run into by my SUV when I run a red light while talking on the cell phone, at least their little car, everybody dies instead of my precious children. Again, the best way to not let that happen to you is simply not to let that happen to you. And both with adults and children, it's really important right now to encourage the growth of bullshit detectors. Bullshit detectors. You see something as blatant as that USA Today I held up, save it. Show it to people. Time and Newsweek, same deal. You know, once somebody sees something that blatant, they're going to stop being somebody who automatically believes everything they see on CNN or everything they read in the New York Times or whatever. You know, it's an icebreaker thing, and if we don't do it, nobody will. I'd love to see media literacy be a required class before you graduate from high school, but that's a long way off. So with kids, it's important too. The younger, the better. I mean, it was easy in my family. Number one, my family didn't hide reality from their kids like so many others do. Unlike most people my age, I remember Vietnam and Watergate and everything else very, very well. Well, they don't remember it at all. I'm shocked at that, because these are people I talked about it with at the time. And I think the reason is because they're well-meaning, maybe, parents change the channel on TV every time ugly war footage or race riots. The Biafra War in Nigeria, where I got my name, if that came on the TV, they didn't want to upset the children, so they changed the channel. No, discuss it with them. Life is ugly. Get used to it. And I learned at an early age, okay, this is what racism is and why it's wrong. This is why pollution is wrong. This is why war is a really, really bad thing. The more they get reality as a kid, the more they're a smarter, conscientious adult later on. Also, I mean, it's really good for kids too at a time when there's so much branding going on. You gotta have this logo on your clothes. You gotta have the really expensive shoes like the other kids or you're gonna get bullied and stuff. All this pressure. Don't play with your imagination. Buy an expensive action figure, just like the cartoon show that advertises the action figure. And it was this, again, was easy in my household. My dad just laughing at or growling at the commercials on TV. And finally, you know, son, that woman all jumping up and down about how much she loves her detergent, she isn't that excited about detergent because detergent isn't exciting. She's just trying to sell you detergent. It may not even be good detergent. The bullshit detectors began to grow and grow and grow. I applied it to school. I applied it to my family. It got pretty weird at times, but I have no regrets on that one. And bullshit detectors are really good when kids get a little older, they're teenagers, and the fashion police are everywhere after them. You gotta be a macho man, or worse yet, young girls even get picked on by their parents for this sometimes. You're fat. You're ugly. You're inadequate. If you're not exactly like Britney Spears, there must be something wrong with you. But if the bullshit detector is in place, the young girl can go, I don't need any of that. I'd rather be me. I'd rather be myself. Bye. Finally, one of the cool things about the so-called spirit of Seattle, which is far from dead, especially in other parts of the world, and even in Europe they call it the spirit of Seattle, which surprises me because when I was in Seattle, having a wonderful time, it seemed to me, oh, we're finally getting off our butts like the Europeans and hitting the streets, but even there, they feel empowered by it. And one cool thing is it's a worldwide anti-corporate movement, but there's no magic leaders that everybody's following. There's people who are better organized or better known, but nobody's just following other people like sheep. No Nelson Mandela, no Václav Havel, no Sul Comandante ski mask, riding in on a white horse to lead everybody to the promised land. We're leading ourselves. We're stitching ourselves together as a tapestry and moving ourselves. And that's cool, but think about this too. Corporate dictatorship is getting so carried away and so greedy, they're headed for a train wreck. And that train wreck is going to happen in our lifetime. Not right away, but in our lifetime, and the writing is already on the wall. Seattle and that, on the United Students Against Sweatshops and all, the good side. September 11th, terrorists, the bad side, or the kidnapping industry in Mexico out of sheer desperation, the bad side. You know, it's already there. But also think about this. Think about all these revolutions that happened almost a decade and a half ago now. Communist bloc fell, the white government in South Africa fell. Mixed results depending on the countries. You know, obviously the former Yugoslavia was horrible. Romania, Rwanda, Congo, Afghanistan, Angola, horrible. But there's some inspiring examples of what happens when all of a sudden the power structure that's always been beating you down violently or whatever isn't there anymore. I mean, it's important to remember that nobody expected the Berlin Wall to go down, and all of a sudden it started going down. All of a sudden, in a matter of days, without a shot being fired, one of the most brutal communist regimes gone in Czechoslovakia. Luckily, South Africa and what is now the Czech Republic are the two really inspiring examples, because the hardcore frontline radical opposition in those countries not only knew what they didn't like, they knew what they did like. They knew what they did want, and they had a pretty good idea thought out of who might be best qualified to help run the different parts of the apparatus so the whole thing didn't blow apart and descend into a bloodbath or something worse than communism or whatever. And we're not there yet, are we? We know what we don't want, but we don't always know what we want. And one way to start getting there is start thinking. You know, it's not too egocentric to from time to time put yourself in the place of, say, what would I do if I was in Bush's shoes right now on this problem? What would I do if I could get in the governor debates for Minnesota? What would I say? What would I want to get through? What would I do if I was mayor of Minneapolis or St. Paul? What would I do if I was on the school board? What would I do if I was in charge of reforming the police department? What would I do if I was in place of the boss I hate so much at work? How would I run the place differently and make it work? Ongoing exercise you can do, put back on the shelf, do again. You won't always get magic answers, but it sure as hell is going to make you smarter and have better questions to ask other people to try and find ideas and concepts and answers and all. And that way identify what you know, what you're good at, that we're all going to need if we're going to be depending on each other to run this place right when corporations go the way of Enron in mass, which, as I say, could very well happen in our lifetime if they don't quit fucking up. But if that happens and we just sit on the sidelines and wait for somebody else to come do the work, we will get fooled again. We're out of time. Thanks for coming.